reflect that in the 5.5 years that I've had the distinct privilege and honor of leading this government, this will come to be regarded as one of the most consequential debates in the life of this administration. Let me at the outset, though, recognize the fact that in the interim, we have a different configuration of the seats of the House, and I would wish the Honourable Leader of the Opposition all the very best in the interests and traditions of this great institution in which we all serve on behalf of the people of this nation. I expect that the debates will continue to be robust. I expect that the debates will be fair and transparent as they always have been, and that whether in or out of this Parliament, this government has shown that people have the right to freely express themselves, as we saw as recent as last Saturday on the streets of Bridgetown again, and have seen on a regular basis. But I want, sir, to speak in the context of this particular piece of legislation, which really has its genesis in, as you heard from the Minister of Labour, in an ILO convention and recommendation of 1949. And this debate is fundamentally not about law, not about minutiae. This debate is fundamentally, philosophically, about the kind of country that we want to live in, the kind of growth that we want to follow in our country, and the commitment to equitable development for all of our people. The creating of opportunities. But opportunities cannot be taken advantage of if people are consumed with fighting injustice. Growth, where possible, is not sustainable if it is not equitable growth and if it is not inclusive growth. And I start from this point of view, sir, because more than anyone else, I am aware that the journey is still very much in stream, that we're very much in the middle of the journey. But like with every race, you don't end up at the finish line before you start. And therefore, for this government, we have had a series of initiatives that have been designed to fuel growth for both the labor movement and the private sector. Because the combined efforts, and you've heard me say so over and over and over, that it is when this country acts in unison, the private sector, the labor movement, and the public sector, that we see always the best results for Barbadians. We saw it when we came together, when most thought that we couldn't, with respect to the issue of saving the value of the Barbados dollar. We saw it when we confronted the horrific experience of a global pandemic. And Mr. Speaker, we have had, without prejudice to that, to take other steps that may appear on first blush to be favoring one of the three partners to which I just referred. In some instances, the public sector receives attention and dominance. And indeed, much of what we've had to do as a government related to the restructuring of not just state-owned enterprises, but elements of government's administration, much of which goes back to a very long and dated period, in some instances 19th century, in some instances 20th century. We have had, Mr. Speaker, much occasion on which we have helped the private sector. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, whether it was from the very early days where we had to write off taxes for debt prior to 2001, whether it was, Mr. Speaker, the waiver of penalties for unfiled returns at the Corporate Affairs Registry, whether, Mr. Speaker, it was waiver of interest for tax arrears once people could make payment arrangements in the Barbados Revenue Authority, because we lived in a country before where if you didn't have a bank helping you to bridge the loan to pay off your arrears, you couldn't get any assistance from the Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, whether it was in relation to the lowering of taxes, corporate taxes, and even though we've seen a slight increase again from 5.5 on the sliding scale to 1 to 9%, it is significantly lower than the 25-28% that companies were accustomed paying in this country for decades. Mr. Speaker, or could it be the adjustments we made to the Severance Payments Act, which literally saved the hotel sector from going bankrupt at the height of the global pandemic in 2020. Mr. Speaker, I pause there at that point, because that is the departure point also for me to start to talk about what we have done for labor. And indeed, the Honourable Minister of Labour this morning reminded us of some of these initiatives. And these didn't happen by accident. I want to thank the Barbados Workers Union for working with us and putting and teeing up before us many of these issues as well, because these issues didn't just drop out of the sky, and that is why how and where we stand philosophically matters so fundamentally today, because these issues have been around for a long time. Mr. Speaker, I was part of a previous government that discussed the possibility of minimum wages, but backed off of it, because they had people like the comments we heard this morning in the paper, where people say that if you do this and pass this legislation, that you're going to end up with tremendous job losses. Mr. Speaker, I heard that in 2005 and 2006, that if we pass the minimum wage, that the minimum wage would lead to the demise of businesses in this country and the bankruptcy of businesses and the loss of jobs, Mr. Speaker. But this government, and we thank, as I said, when we sat with the Workers' Union and realized what was possible in December 2020, at the outset of mediating with the G4S strike, we realized that what the workers were enduring was not reasonable. And we set about a pathway that led to the establishment of a committee that advised us, and we passed the minimum wage in April of 2021. Now, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member for St. George North very clearly that there has not been a meeting of the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee in the last few years, and I'm sure that the Minister of Labour has also heard her very clearly, and that the good order for government requires that entities meet to review. And I will not go further into that. But this was the same government before we did the minimum wage in October of 2020 that sat before you, sir. And once again, my advisors in the public service told me, Prime Minister, you cannot pass legislation and appoint 3,000 people, that there will at least be 1,000 or 2,000 who will be disadvantaged. And I said, if there are going to be people who are disadvantaged, then put an appellate mechanism in place to deal with those who feel they have been disadvantaged. And Mr. Speaker, you heard today from the Minister of Labour that October 2020 legislation led to the appointment of 3,388 public servants in this country who were languishing operating as if they were in Hollywood, Bollywood, or Nollywood, depending on which continent you like. Mr. Speaker, no. And of those 3,388, just over 400 were as a result of appeals heard and deemed to be successful by Her Excellency, the head of state of this, our nation. Mr. Speaker, the point that I'm making is that if you believe in something and you believe it to be righteous and you believe it to be in the interests of people, then you must proceed. There will always be some who will say, I'm not sure. There'll always be some who will say, I'm anxious. There'll always be some who will say, I'm fearful. There'll always be some who will say, pause and check and check and check and check again, or check the law again. I have an Attorney General in whom I am extremely, extremely confident is capable of advising this government. And therefore, with respect to this matter, we believe that the time has come to be able to set standards and parameters. And in setting these parameters, all that we are saying is, very simply, if you want a government contract, as was said before in 1952, or you benefit from a government concession, in both instances, make sure that you meet the minimum standards for treating workers sector by sector. Now, minimum, sir, is a subjective word. And therefore, what the legislation simply seeks to do is to set a framework that allows us to be able to consult and settle what those minimum standards are. Consult and settle. And Mr. Speaker, it does nothing more, nothing less. The member for St. Peter and the member for St. Michael West Central, both of whom were involved extensively, and indeed the member for St. James Central at points, over the period of time from September to December, with the consultations and conversations in the colloquium that they engaged with between hoteliers and hotel workers. Now, Mr. Speaker, it was referred to in this debate that I spoke to this in my budget last year, and that is true. And I want to give it context, because for us, it was very clear that having gone through a period of time, two things in the pandemic, I referred to one already, that one of the most difficult discussions we had as a government, sir, was the conversation that we had with the hotel workers and indeed the Barbados Workers Union with respect to the amendment to the Severance Payments Act. In those deep days of, dark days of 2020, sir, when there was no movement allowed, no planes landing, we saw the range and impact of tourism in this country. There was all of a sudden a glut of pork in the market. There were farmers who couldn't get things sold. I want us to carry back our memory, carry back our minds to that point. But what was also happening was that the hotel doors were closed and the workers were home. And the unemployment benefits were then extended to over 40,000 Barbadians. And Mr. Speaker, because there was no end in sight, the country closed just at the end of March. And really and truly, we did not see planes start to come back here for almost 6 months, which then would have meant that hotels would have become bankrupt, sir. And sir, we took the clear decision. It was difficult. And I remember on the last day on which we met, the member for St. Peter reminded me that the honourable member for St. George North made comments that we told her, the thing now start, give it a chance to work. Where she said that please do not let us forget these workers because I feel that they're going to be forgotten. Those were her words. Now, Mr. Speaker, At the same time, within a matter of months, when we shut down Barbados on December 31st, 2020, All Year's Day, remember? For another 4 months effectively because of the rampant spread of COVID, there emerged on social media and traditional media a virulent attack against the tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, it didn't come out of nowhere. And Barbadians behaved some Barbadians behaved as if tourism no longer was our business and as if this was the reason why we were suffering all of these things in the pandemic. I refer to these things, sir, because all of these things have colored the attitude to the sector. And indeed, I go further. Early last year, it became clear too that a number of workers had simply not returned to their employment within the tourism sector. Now, Mr. Speaker, when jobs are available and people choose not to go back to them, you have to ask yourself what is going on. And sir, it's not just Barbados. In fairness, it's not Barbados alone. It happens in the USA, it is happening in Canada, it is happening in the United Kingdom, it's happening in the region. And in many instances, there is a serious shortage of available labor in certain sectors across the economy. Mr. Speaker, we have another reason why there's a shortage as well, which is simply just not having numbers. But when you compound that with people saying, no, I'm not going back to a job I had for 20 years or 22 years or 15 years or 10 years, you have to ask yourself what was happening. And that is why in the budget last year, I made it clear that we needed to have a colloquium, a conversation between the owners of capital in the hotel industry and indeed the owners, the workers in the sector. Mr. Speaker, needless to say, from September, that process started. And I'm not going to repeat what the Honourable Minister of Tourism or the Honourable Minister of Labour or indeed the member for St. George North has already said. Suffice it to say, however, that there are clear problems in the industry and the sector. It may well be that some of these have been imported. It may well be that some of these are as a result of people trying to do a thing, trying to see what they can get away with. But whatever it is, this government said that it is unacceptable. I have known what it is for different ministers of tourism that also have to speak to certain hotels about these short-term contracts. Who, Mr. Speaker? Which one of us in this country can be comfortable with 3- and 4-month contracts and 6-month contracts unless it is job work that you're doing? And against that backdrop, sir, even when I have gone into certain and taken responsibility for a certain statutory authority recently, I said, get rid of the 6-month contracts. The member for Christchurch West will tell you so. That the laws of Barbados are sufficiently strong, robust, and transparent to treat the people with decency and integrity. And Mr. Speaker, we didn't need to go any further than that. So that when I say to you, sir, that we need to be able to deal with some of these issues within the sector, and in spite of people talking with them, moral suasion in some instances just simply didn't work. We've already heard of the case of the practices of dipping into the service charge, which was intended, and I was at the meeting when I heard Sir Roy Trotman give us the history of the service charge and how hoteliers use this as a mechanism that would moderate what they would increase the base pay by. Mr. Speaker, these are the realities of ordinary Barbadians. These are our family. These are our children. These are our aunts, our uncles, our brothers, our sisters. And sir, there can be no growth in this country until we see everybody. I use the phrase all the time, seeing people, hearing people, feeling people, because it is as basic as that. That's what it comes back down to. And everybody can always find a reason why not to do something. But leadership is not easy, and governing is not easy, and it's not about speeches. There's some people who can speak, well, that's true. But at the end of the day, the real crunch, the real test of leadership comes not in what we say, but in how we act. How do we act in unfortunate circumstances and difficult circumstances? Mr. Speaker, in the middle of the pandemic, this government chose to act in the interest of workers. I told you with the minimum wage and the passage of the legislation. Mr. Speaker, in the middle of the pandemic, this government was choosing to pass legislation to stop people from discriminating against workers in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, you understand what I'm telling you? This is not about rhetoric. This is about action. And inclusive growth means, and let me be very clear, I do not believe that the minimum wage is the destination. The minimum wage is the starting point. The destination must be economic enfranchisement in this country. And Mr. Speaker, even in all that we have done to restructure state-owned enterprises, this government has set a clear model. If we have to restructure, in some instances because what we inherited is lumpy, is incapable of being sustained, then we choose wherever possible to ensure that we carry along workers on the process of economic enfranchisement with us. Mr. Speaker, we've given that commitment at the airport. We've given that commitment at the seaport. And I fully anticipate that the member for St. Michael West Central will be able to update the House soon as to what is happening with respect to both in terms of the enfranchisement of workers there. Mr. Speaker, we've also indicated that where other SOEs, other state-owned enterprises have to come, that don't just look at the workers and say, go your own way. Mr. Speaker, the TAP program, the member for Christchurch West, led the TAP program in the transport board sector. And in the early days, he might have even struggled a bit to get some numbers up. And now our problem is that there's more demand than there is capacity. Because, Mr. Speaker, economic enfranchisement matters. And that is why the government is not trying to lash out at the private sector. It's the contrary. The government wants the private sector to help us continue to lead growth, but we want growth that is inclusive and growth that is fair. We want a minimum set of conditions for the conduct of business in this country because the country is simply too small to accommodate other than fairness, transparency, and decent work for decent jobs in this country and for employees in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, this comes down fundamentally to an issue of trust. And some even say conflict of interest. But let me deal with the conflict of interest first. Because some have said that, oh, you are listening to Labour and you're giving Labour what they want. Mr. Speaker, we're not giving Labour what they want. We are giving the country what it needs. Decent jobs for decent, inclusive growth. And Mr. Speaker, this is not something that is alien to our philosophy as a party or alien to the philosophy of any of us who have grown up in the Barbados Labour Party. It is not alien. Because as we saw, when universal adult suffrage came in this country, in 1951 the election was, in 1950 the legislation was passed. The first thing they set about doing was dealing with protection of wages. They then dealt with holidays with pay. They dealt with amendments to the Shop Act. Mr. Speaker, because this party understood and this country needed workers after 3.5 centuries of exploitation to be given a fair chance to be able to raise their children and raise their families in decent circumstances, sir. And that is why when anybody tells me about conflict of interest, let me deal with it up front and center. There was no conflict of interest when it was Grantley Adams and Hugh Springer, two national heroes. There was no conflict of interest when it was Sir Grantley and Sir Frank. There was no conflict of interest when it was Mr. Barrow, the Right Excellent Earl Barrow, and Sir Frank. There was no conflict of interest when it was Tom Adams and O'Brien Trotman. There was no conflict of interest when it was Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford and Sir Roy Trotman, or Mr. Barrett and Sir Roy Trotman. How is it now that there's a conflict of interest that there's a female General Secretary and a female Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, let it remain a conflict for the misogynists. But this government knows that that tradition is not unique to this country. You go to the United Kingdom now and you see the linkages between the labor movement and the political parties. Granted, more labor than anything else. You go to the United States of America. Where did the current president find himself last year when there was a strike for the auto workers that went on for weeks or months? He went on the front line with the workers, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no progressive political movement or party, any part of the world, that does not align itself with the interests of labor. And Mr. Speaker, this party will not deviate. And for those who want to accuse of white shadows and all of these things, look at the facts. Look at the facts. But the difference is that we are not saying that one entity in Barbados must be at the exclusion of the other. But we recognize that, like with children in a family, each child may need different things. You don't have a family of 3 and 4 children. I take my own family. The way that my parents treated me is different from how they treated my brothers and my sister. There may be a common platform for all of us. But there are times when they found that they needed to do different things for different of the ones of the children. There are different things that I may have to do as Prime Minister and Chair of Cabinet to facilitate the public sector. There are different things that the Cabinet and Parliament will have to do to facilitate the private sector. There are different things that the Cabinet and Parliament will have to do to facilitate the labor movement. And Mr. Speaker, today is an occasion where we, in my humble opinion, deal with both labor and the private sector. Because growth for the private sector will only be sustainable if it is walking lockstep with labor in this matter of decent jobs and inclusive growth. And Mr. Speaker, therefore, on the issue of trust, and I get it. There are some people who are anxious because even though they knew that this process was taking place for over 4 or 5 months with the hotel sector and the labor movement, not everybody follows and tracks news every day or every week. And politicians sometimes are guilty of thinking that because we listen to things, everybody else listens to the same things that we do. That's not true. But what was clear is that this legislation is intended to simply say the government is spending $750 million a year in tax expenditures. Our revenue is $3.2 billion. Tax expenditures are necessary, yes, to stimulate the economy and to encourage investment, particularly because people have choices. But people who are worth their salt will not shy away from treating their workers well. And for those who say that it makes your business uncompetitive to meet a minimum standard, then you're effectively telling us that your business can only exist if it is exploiting labor. Now, that surely cannot be the message in a Barbados where for centuries labor was exploited. It cannot be. And that is why, even before the Minimum Wages Act, The Shops Act had a minimum wage for shop assistants going back for decades. Now, it may not have been as exhaustive and as comprehensive as we would have liked. And even as we speak to the concessions today, the Minister of Labour has reminded us, as has the member for St. George North, that recommendations which are not binding from the ILO but are to provide guidance indicated that this is to deal with subsidies and utilities. Because the recognition is that this is not the government's money. This is not Mayor Motley's money. This is not the Labour Party's money. This is the taxpayers' money that provides the concessions. And if the taxpayers are agreeing to forego in order to fuel growth, then it must be inclusive growth that the taxpayers called for by the establishment of minimum standards, sector by sector by sector by sector in this country. And Mr. Speaker, it is against that backdrop that we have said that let us pause. Because the notion that every time you have a group of people behaving bad, that the country can melt itself down into industrial instability, industrial unrest, is not in the interest of this country. And I tell two stories for the record that have shaped my opinion and my approach to these matters. When I was 16 years old, the Right Excellency Hugh Springer sat me down and said, you know, I was asking him why he left after being the first General Secretary of the Union and went to Jamaica, etc. And ironically, I think he was an MP for St. George too. And he said to me, he said, don't worry about me, and don't worry about Sir Grantley as it comes to the Union. This country owes Sir Frank Walcott a huge, huge debt of gratitude. I said, what do you mean, sir? He said, many people saw Sir Frank as aggressive, sometimes even bombastic, offensive. He said his bite was very rare, but his bark was constant. And he said that that was because it was that way that he was able to build a strong labor movement that inured to the benefit of this country. And that Barbados had a record that is almost unparalleled with respect to industrial stability by reason of having that strong union movement. He then told me, do not be surprised by what you expect. He said unionists will be strong in their language. Ironically, almost 11, 12 years later, the then Prime Minister, the former member for St. Peter, of late memory, Owen Seymour Arthur, told us in Cabinet early on, do not be surprised by what you expect. Now, that may have multiple applications in here this week. But he told us that with respect to the unions, their main currency is their advocacy. And I want to appeal to members of the private sector who sometimes get a little hot under the collar. If a union does not aggressively represent their membership and their constituents, how then are they able to advance their causes other than by taking protests? And Mr. Speaker, it's no different from lawyers. I get it. They're advocates in the cause of their client or their constituent. So that I do not ever get upset when a person aggressively defends their client or their constituent. And perhaps sometimes, sir, people hear the passion in my voice and take it as a 6 for 9. Because I have come up as an advocate, and I understand what it is to have to represent people whose lives may be at risk. And therefore, sometimes the language will be stronger. But I say all of these things to make the point, sir, that when all is said and done, what we are doing is trying to create a platform for us to move forward in lockstep. And what is at stake here is trust. Mr. Speaker, the government met in good faith every single time the members of the private sector reached out. Within a day or two and asked to meet with me, we met. They've met consistently, those who want to, with the Ministry of Labour and the Chief Labour Officer and the Minister. Mr. Speaker, I appeal to all to recognize that if the government says in good faith, and the Minister spoke to it, because the bill actually went to the stakeholders before it came to Cabinet. You know that, Mr. Speaker? And as a result, when the private sector met with us and indicated that tax refunds was included, I said, we don't need to go any further, because it has never been government's policy to include tax refunds, because tax refunds are the property of the individual, in a way that tax concessions are discretionary. And tax concessions, like licenses, as the Attorney General will tell you, can come with any conditionalities so attached. But what goes further is that, and we said with respect to National Insurance Scheme, the drafter put that in there regrettably, but National Insurance Scheme could never be in it because we don't have the authority, and it's its own body corporate especially, but we don't have the authority to waive national insurance contributions. And then the third point related to the appellate mechanism to ensure rigor. And the private sector asked, and we said we agree entirely. And in fact, we met, and the Attorney General would tell you, that we agreed that the Barbados Revenue Authority Tribunal, which deals with waivers of penalties and concessions and other things pertaining to revenue, would be the appropriate authority for people to have access to appeal to. But it didn't stop there, sir. We also pointed out to them that because of a Barbados Labour Party government, there is also another piece of legislation that holds each of us to transparent and fair action as a government. And that is the Administrative Justice Act, Chapter 109B. And therefore, there can be no arbitrary action by any minister. There can be no breach of natural justice by any minister. There can be no unreasonable considerations by a minister. So that a separate point from the right of appeal to the Barbados Revenue Authority Tribunal is the actions vested in each and every citizen of this country under the Administrative Justice Act, Chapter 109B. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have gone to every possible length to ensure rigor, transparency, and fairness as we do the right thing for the workers of this country and the right thing for the country in terms of inclusive growth. But I go further, sir. We have said to the private sector and to the labor movement, both of you come with your suggestions for the things that you would want to see in the regulations. Because this is a framework piece of legislation. And therefore, the regulations will have greater impact than it would, as the Attorney General would tell you, than in other pieces of legislation. And therefore, how you appeal, what you appeal, when you appeal, how you decide, all of those things have now to be captured in the regulations. And I fully expect, sir, that should this bill, once this bill passes both houses, that the Honourable Minister of Labour should then be writing both the labour movement and the private sector for their input into regulations so that the draftsman can get ahead with the task as a matter of urgency. Mr. Speaker, sir, governments are best when, sir, they are fair in seeing people and transparent in the manner in which they act. And so we have been fair and transparent. The members of the Barbados Private Sector Association and the Barbados Employers Confederation were also part of those discussions with the hotel sector from early September. The entities whether the unions or indeed the private sector, when they have requested, we have also facilitated those conversations quickly and without delay, sir. I want this Honourable House, sir, to reflect that we were not elected to do only the regulatory stuff or the minutiae that is involved in governance. And believe you me, there's a lot of regulatory issues that have to be addressed just simply in running a government. In the schools every day, in the running of hospitals every day, in the delivery of services every day. People want it, and things will change. As we've seen, with respect to what the country will have to come to adjust itself in understanding why it must do work within the period of time of the dry season more and more because of the climate crisis. Sir, and there are some huge issues beyond our control that we're going to have to continue to confront. And I don't have to go into them today because we know them all, from the climate crisis right back through to the geopolitical instability of the world in which we live today. But we were elected fundamentally to make people's lives better. Not just the country, but the individual lives at the small micro level. And Mr. Speaker, I am satisfied that this is but another step in that journey. I do not believe it is the destination. It is no more the destination for hotel workers as it is for the construction workers last year, or as it is for those who are outside of those two sectors. It is no more the destination than minimum wages could ever be. Mr. Speaker, these are starting points or staging points along the journey, depending on which one you take it. Mr. Speaker, this government commits itself to continuing on the journey of making the lives better for Barbadian people. And whether it is in doing all that we can to ease the cost of living burdens, or whether it is in trying to remove injustice from the face of this landscape, or whether it is in strengthening democracy, as others want to now use as a buzzword, without reference to any factual structures to underpin it. Mr. Speaker, this government will continue to do right philosophically by the workers and by ordinary Barbadians, in spite of the difficulty occasioned in so doing. In spite of those who say that it will lead to a mass layoff in jobs. In spite of those who every time tell you, don't make that next step. The boogeyman around the corner. You're going to get anxious, you're going to fall down. Mr. Speaker, if you do not have courage, do not come into public life to act on behalf of the people of this country. Because there will be times, sir, even with respect to the restructuring of our debt. The member for Christchurch East Central will tell you that for 5-6 years, the last government refused to move because the last Prime Minister did not believe that we should seek to restructure our debt. And Mr. Speaker, we restructured our debt within 18 months. And the same banks that told us that we were going to face Armageddon. I sat in a room, the member for Christchurch East Central will tell you, and heard a banker come from Canada to tell me that Barbados restructuring its debt would explode the stability of that Canadian bank globally. What foolish nonsense, I heard. And within 1 year, the banks had how many years of losses? 1 single year of losses. Mr. Speaker, thank God for confidence. And thank God for being able to look into the mirror and believe in ourselves and know that so long as we can deconstruct and make sure that philosophically and programmatically we are doing the right thing in the right way, then we will continue to see this country move from strength to strength to strength. But more importantly than the country, the individual families that need to be carried along the way, enfranchised and given opportunity to be not just Barbadian citizens, but global citizens with Bajan roots. Because when all is said and done, our resources are limited, our capacity is limited on island, but we can take on the world, as Gary Sobers and Rihanna, two national heroes, have taught us. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask all who are reflecting on this debate to recognize that we have been told many times, do not step out of our comfort level, that this will cause angst, that this will cause problems. But, Mr. Speaker, as with the minimum wages, as with the appointments of the public servants, as with the restructuring of our debt, as with the saving of our dollar, as with the actions that were difficult to take because they were hard to swallow in the middle of a pandemic, but to save lives, this government will continue first to be informed by who we are, by what we believe in, and above all else, will continue to do the right thing. We may not always get it right, as you hear all the time. People fall down sometimes, people stumble. But it is how we get back up and how we manage and how we keep our eye on the North Star that will always matter in making the defining difference to Barbadian people. It is regrettable that it has taken, Mr. Speaker, 71 more years to ensure that recommendation 94, which was 84, which was linked to the Convention 84 that Sir Grantley Adams passed in 1952, that it has taken 71 years to be passed by a Parliament of Barbados to allow for inclusive and decent growth for our people and for our country. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that Sir Grantley and others, and Right Excellent Errol Barrow, in those early days of building out this country, would have felt the same way when powers, principalities and powers, way beyond their control, would have told them you are doing the wrong thing, or have tried to discipline them for doing the right thing for people. And Mr. Speaker, if they could withstand it, and if they could endure it, and if we could be the beneficiaries of that legacy and that courage, Mr. Speaker, I pray that the children of Barbados will be the legacy of this courageous debate today on the part of this government. And I thank the Barbados Workers Union for bringing this to our attention and for us for having the courage to accept it. May the workers of Barbados always be the beneficiary of decent terms and conditions. And may this country only ever be the beneficiary of strong and inclusive growth. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for Sindhiam Central.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to say a few words on this matter. And sir, I want to begin by saying to you that I reject out of hand any notion whatsoever that the simple requirement that an investor at any level, even though the legislation to which we speak very clearly speaks of one benefiting from concessions from the government, but that an investor at any level be required to treat the workers of Barbados decently will lead to the collapse of the investment climate in this country. I begin on that notion, sir. And I want to proffer a view that today really has been a very historic day. And I know that as I say that, sir, your mind goes almost instinctively to the fact that this was a day where a newly minted leader of the opposition gave his maiden speech, etc., etc. But it is not that historical fact to which I refer. I refer, sir, rather to the content thereof. We have been treated to a discourse, sir, which began by suggesting that the legislation before us was curious. Curious calls he it, Mr. Speaker, for a number of reasons. I want to begin by saying that I have been around this place now for 21 years. I have never seen an occupant of that chair, sir, couch a contribution to a matter of this importance only in the language of legal technicality, only by saying to the country, this is on shaky ground because of A point of law or X point of law. We have to this point, sir, not heard a suggestion as to what government should do, could do, ought to do, could have done with respect to the inescapable fundamental that when the employers of Barbados, not all, but some, have demonstrated a determination to mistreat the workers of Barbados, the constituents of ours who sent us here to represent them, that they must turn, those workers, those constituents, must turn to us as a government to stand in the breach. That is an inescapable part of the proposition, to which the honourable member has chosen to remain silent. Now, sir, it is the easiest thing, perhaps, to pick up a law made simple. Go to the back of the book, go in the glossary, and see a phrase chose in action or chose in being, come in here without any context associated therewith, devoid of any analysis on what it is, misconstrue the French, so it began as choose, it ended up as chose, only when corrected from this bench, sir. But at no stage make contact with the fundamental social and economic imperative. The imperative that brings a government representing the people of Barbados to this parliament to stand in the breach in defense of a public mischief, which is simply put that there are myriad instances of cases where the workers of Barbados are being treated in a deplorable and unacceptable manner. Matters that we thought had been laid to rest, Mr. Speaker, and you've heard the Honourable Member of St. Peter, you heard the Honourable Minister of Tourism, sir, you heard the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union, taking you back to 1949. This house, Mr. Speaker, your house, treated to these matters in 49, and in 52, and in 53, and thereafter. How do we come to this point? And how do we come to this place in 2024 where we have to relitigate issues that had been laid to rest, Mr. Speaker? Or so we thought. And if we fail to treat to those matters in a frontal way, are we not equally traitorous? Are we not equally betraying the confidence and the trust of those who we asked to send us to this place? Now, I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there's a certain element of misappreciation of political practice that leads the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to treat to this as just simply a curious piece of legislation. He raises as one of the foundation pieces of his term curious the issue of a colleague making a recommendation to another colleague and suggests, as I understand it, that because there's not complete independence of action or power to act in the matter, that a Minister of Labour and a Minister of Tourism would then have to work out how best they're going to navigate a potential disagreement. No, sir, I say a misappreciation of the political practice because in any given day, of any given week, in any given month of the history of this administration, and this is not the only administration I've been privileged to serve in, sir, So I can say it has been my experience in not one cabinet, but in two. Mr. Speaker, sir, members of cabinet are called upon to interface with each other and to secure each other's support in order to advance an issue. And that if you go to your colleague and you and your colleague have a disagreement, that is when you go to the wider body of the cabinet. And all of the members of the cabinet of the front bench here and the Prime Minister present can pull me down and tell me pause because I'm going hopelessly wrong. But that is the political practice. This is nothing new. This should not have been something that was shielded from the eyes of the honourable member. It is nothing horrific. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is basically how good governance must be. That if I have a view and my colleague, the Minister of the Environment, has a competing and contrasting view, we sit down like mature adults and work it out. And if we can't, then we go to our colleagues in the cabinet for the cabinet to make a determination. How then does this become an impediment to progress, Mr. Speaker? If you came here intending to do something more than the theatrical, then, sir, that is the first point on which the argument fails. But, Mr. Speaker, I have to remind this House, I have been privileged to serve, sir, as the Minister of Tourism of Barbados. And the Tourism Development Act, sir, empowers any minister. It ain't only now come about. We didn't create it. We came and found it. And it empowers any minister. If circumstances arise where in the judgment of the minister, there is a failure to operate a hotel in accordance with a certain standard of operation, that you have to collaborate. You are mandated by the legislation. So when I hear this thing about speaking to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, as a lawyer, let me speak to you as one too. Perhaps I will speak to you as one who is familiar with the legislation. The Tourism Development Act, Mr. Speaker, sir, enables the Minister of Tourism, whosoever he or she may be at any given time, to collaborate with the minister responsible for Home Affairs, who has responsibility for the Barbados Fire Service, and to collaborate, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the Minister of Health, who has responsibility, Mr. Speaker, sir, for public health in this country. Because if you have to intervene in order to suspend the license enabling a hotel operator to function, then you must do so in collaboration with a plurality of other government departments which are outside of the reach of the Minister of Tourism. So what we are seeing, what we are hearing today, conflicts in a material and sharp manner with the letter of the law and the practice in this country of public affairs. I didn't come here, Mr. Speaker, sir, to hold a tutorial, but in the event that one was not called upon, because every lawyer has not read every piece of legislation in Barbados's volume of laws. You know where to find it if you're well trained, but you may not have been called upon to read it because it has never been a matter before you. So I can forgive someone who may not have been called upon to read a piece of legislation. But what I find, sir, perhaps unforgivable, is that you could be part of this parliament, which passed a historic piece of legislation known as the Vendors Act in the last term of this government. And in that piece of legislation, which did not just come through here on a Tuesday, debate on a Tuesday, and went long about the business, but we went out to a committee in which we invited every stakeholder in Barbados to participate. And the views of the committee were carried on the radio of this country, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the airwaves. And Mr. Speaker, it is in that legislation, this is nothing new to anybody in here and should not be, that the minister responsible for commerce is empowered to make a decision to seize the goods in certain circumstances of a vendor. But he cannot do so unless he acts in consort with the Minister of Agriculture, because those goods have to be held in such a way that if they are perishable commodities, fruits, vegetables, etc., that they are protected. And if they fail to be protected, then the vendor himself or herself is entitled to bring action against the government of Barbados to be compensated for the value of the fruits or vegetables that have been destroyed or damaged. But that's part of that which we all sat down here and did. So therefore, sir, it is a sad and sorry occasion if one comes to do more than the theatrical. It is a sad and sorry occasion when one is acting in a manner that suggests that you are nascent and undernourished on the factual accuracy of the way in which this system of government operates. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are told as well that it is a curious piece of legislation because there's a difficulty in working out who is the respondent. Is it the Minister of Labor? We all heard it. Or is it the Minister of Labor you're going to, or the Minister of Tourism you're going to? And I don't know. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, because these matters have been treated in the courts of Barbados for donkey years. And people, as you know, sir, and as I know my colleague, my learned friend knows, people are sued jointly and severally. And if I could look at my own constituency, sir, where I had to act in defense of a worthless administration in the last government that sought to use the good people, offend the good people of Hoyts Village and Bagatelle by using that dump in a way that, as though it was a private market, whatsoever it cared to do in that dump, you could do. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I took them to the court, acting interestingly enough with the advice of my learned friend. And the minister responsible for Home Affairs, the minister responsible for the environment, the minister responsible, sir, for matters pertaining to public health, and the Attorney General of Barbados, as he then was, were all joined. They were sued jointly and severally, sir. So again, I know it is within the knowledge and the ken of the honourable member. And so I urge, I go no further at this stage because I know it's new, you're new in the job, and the whole nation watching you. And as Honourable Member for Christchurch West pointed out, the pressure of new office can make a man tremble when he pick up the paper and so on. But Mr. Speaker, sir, we will forgive him on this occasion. I urge colleagues to forgive him on this occasion. But sir, better has to be done if you are not to make a mockery of that office to which you have now ascended. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader, the piloter of this bill, he who piloted the bill, the member for St. Peter, pointed us at the very beginning to the very important point that you should begin by looking at the essence of what this legislation is about. And he made the point that we are asking any employing entity which is benefiting from the public purse to heed a minimum standard with respect to labor. And I want to take out two phrases from that quotation from the Honourable Member of St. Peter, who made all the technicalities disappear and put it down into very simple bread and butter terms. We are asking any employing entity benefiting from the public purse to hold themselves to a minimum standard with respect to labor. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, benefiting from the public purse. We just heard the Honourable Minister of Finance and Prime Minister of this country make a point in passing, but I'm going to spend a few minutes on it, that this country, sir, offers concessions to the tune of $750 million per year. That is no near amount of money. And in case people forget, in 2014 or thereabouts, I don't want to mislead the House, so let me say thereabouts. It's either 2014 or 2015. An IMF team doing an assessment of Barbados' economy made the point then that our concessions, in their judgment, were way too high and needed to be reined in. And at that time, we were talking about $500 million in concessions. Today, we are at $250 million. 750. We've gone up by 250 million more. And let me make the other point, sir. Because rather than reining them in, this country was saddled again in the tourism sector, and understandably so, perhaps because tourism, taken directly or indirectly, constitutes about 40% of the gross domestic product of Barbados. It is said to employ, directly or indirectly, over 35,000 people in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a huge part of our economy. And when concessions were granted by the last government to Sandals, the concessions captured virtually everything imaginable. Almost everything imaginable, free of duty. Whether it be cars, whether it be fittings in the hotel room, whether it be the foods that people are eating. Mr. Speaker, so a wide range. But what did it do? It also had the knock-on effect of creating an instability in the tourism sector, because legitimately other people said, if they could come and get that, what about me? Why I can't get too? And obviously government is not in a position to give to every hotelier that which you give to Sandals. So the instability, and let us be analytical now and leave the theatrics and emotionalism aside. The instability in the tourism sector would have begun back then. And Mr. Speaker, sir, government, acting in consort with the BHTA, agreed that a concession would be put in place for all the other hotels, whereby you would get your proteins free of duty, and you would get beverages like your liquor free of duty. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that that's the first point I want to touch on when we talk about benefiting from the public purse. Because every hotelier who has the sale of liquor on his premises benefits from that duty-free concession. Everybody who's selling on cooking and selling food to their guests benefits from that concession. Every one of them. And Mr. Speaker, sir, every one of the tourism ministers, I'm going to come to this a little later on, has a duty to try to make sure that that application for the concession is treated to and approved as swiftly as possible. When I was tourism minister, sir, a week, and I believe this will be the testimony of the current minister of tourism, a week don't pass where you don't see 100 of them and more. And at this time of the year, when it's winter season, you might see up to 200 passing your desk in a week. And Mr. Speaker, so this duty-free protein, steak and lamb, New Zealand lamb, and lobster, and the alcohol, Mr. Speaker, every spirit imaginable. Some you can't even pronounce. Oh, Mr. Speaker, sir, the other part of the comment made by the Honourable member for St. Peter when he talked about minimum standards. Now, if this country can take itself seriously, sir, I want to say this as the minister who has been asked to have oversight of the productive sectors of this country. And I want to talk to Barbadians through you, Mr. Speaker, sir, as seriously as I can. We are playing Russian roulette. Let me put it more bluntly. We are busy playing the fool with a very serious matter. If an economy does not hold itself to maintaining certain standards, sir, that economy is in danger of implosion. There must be standards of public health. That is how we protect the health and well-being of all of our citizens and everyone who's doing business here. There must be standards, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the environment, how we protect our environment, because without that environment, there is no functioning island, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, there must be standards in the way in which we conduct industrial enterprise in this country. Because if we don't have accurate forms of measurement, men can get robbed blind at the petrol pump. People will be being asked to pay for more in the scale at the supermarket or in the market than that which they are taking home. You're being robbed blind. There must be standards of measurement. Mr. Speaker, sir, there must be standards in the way in which we build out our industry so that that which is being done is in accordance with the best practice internationally. And sir, if we fail to do any of these things, let us understand that we fail to gain access to other people's markets for our goods and services, and so therefore, sir, the ability to trade and earn foreign exchange for this country becomes compromised. I hope I make myself clear. So talking about standards is no pie in the sky thing. Any economy around the world that is taking itself seriously is looking at standards. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't want to anticipate legislation, but you will see on the order paper of Barbados a metrology bill, which is about, again, advancing standards in this country. So I will have a chance to talk about that a little later on down the road. Not today. But, sir, if we accept that standards are in fact important, how can we embrace all but leave out those that walk and talk? The living, breathing human beings, sir, that are loosely and callously called labor. But these are people, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are your constituents and mine, my neighbors and yours. The people we interface with on the streets of Barbados every day, that is what is being loosely and callously called labor. These people, Mr. Speaker, sir, must have standards within which they work. Otherwise, they will be exploited, taken advantage of, oppressed, repressed, and suppressed. That, unfortunately, has been the history of this region, and, Mr. Speaker, sir, it has been the history of this island. And I make no apology for saying that it is a shame that we come to this place to discuss a matter of this nature. If you feel that it is on shaky legal ground, I accept counsel to counsel that that may be an argument that we can have. But we cannot remain silent, Mr. Speaker, sir, as though we've been struck mute on our tongues cleaved to our collective roofs of our mouths on the issue of what government can do, should do, and must do to protect the rights of working Barbadians, sir, to have a proper environment within which they work. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I go on to say it is therefore necessary, if we are going to protect the industrial stability of this country, that we take this legislation at face value. It had to come. All of us were here last year when a budget debate took place. All of us were here last year, Mr. Speaker, sir, when the Prime Minister of Barbados spoke to the matter. I spoke to the matter, I know, and the matter I'm speaking of was in the construction sector. When, Mr. Speaker, sir, we made it clear that there were some people in the construction sector of Barbados who were running racket when it came to how they were treating their workers. And we know some of the things that they were doing, Mr. Speaker. Let us not pretend that this is something new. Because if the way it bothers the leader, the member for St. Peter, it bothers me, Mr. Speaker. This is not new information. I stood shoulder to shoulder with the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union at the annual general meeting of the Barbados Workers' Union last year. And she spoke to an issue, and I spoke to that meeting about an issue that does not just impact the hotel sector. It was in the construction sector, and it is spreading to others as well. We talk about it today. This 3-month and 6-month employment. And we all know it is wrong. We all know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it has to stop. And yes, there have been those who point, correctly so, to some parts of government where it started creeping the government too. And the Prime Minister, to her credit, stamped it out at the Barbados Water Authority. And it has been stamped out in other places of the government of Barbados, where people would want to get away with just rolling over a 3-month contract. But you can't keep a man on a 3-month contract in perpetuity. Well, how he get a loan to fix his house? How he get a loan to advance his children's well-being? How does he do anything, Mr. Speaker? Because we all know when you're going to the financial institution, it ain't gonna work. And none of us in here, including the newly minted leader of the opposition, would be content with a 3-month contract. Not one of us, sir. Not one. But it ain't only that. There are people who have been told midterm of their employment, well, Skipper, you are not really an employee anymore, you know. You're an independent contractor. And so therefore, the benefits that you should be thinking that you get in, or you might be thinking you get in, they really don't apply to you because we just don't look at you as though we employ you anymore. That's what the General Secretary of the Barbers Workers Union has to contend with. And when I spoke to the union, without fear of criticism, because I know what they're going to say about me, but the truth of the matter is I've been around long enough now to take any amount of the blows. So therefore, I wanted them to know that I am aware that even in the banks of Barbados and the financial services sector of this country, we have this type of problem arising. It's in that you only treat into the hoteliers. It's in that you only treat in, Mr. Speaker, sir, to those in construction. It is spreading across the width of the economy and must be stamped out. So when I hear people ask, but why? I said, then you must be tone deaf. Because I know that the leader of the Barbados Workers Union, I know that her Deputy General Secretary, I know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this has been being talked about and for, God knows, at least 2 years. At what point then is an appropriate time for government to intervene? Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, this matter borders on industrial action. And that's why we have to be here today. Because any serious union cannot only talk about it, the time would have to come when the union would have to act. And so what then do we do, Mr. Speaker? Is it a responsible government that will, in the middle of the tourism, in the winter season, which is where we are now, in the height of the winter season, send a signal to all the world, Barbados shut down, because Barbados is not prepared to take serious action to protect the environment within which its workers operate. And when I hear the foolishness emanating from the mouth of the young man who's recently returned to the island after having spent time at the pleasure of the wardens in the United States of America, but how this will create a widespread dislocation. But that's what he did. He spent time at the pleasure of the wardens in the United States of America. And it is time that we stop being mealy-mouthed about the effort to resuscitate that which is nothing but a basic criminal in this country. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that you cannot seriously have an economy that is going to be, you're going to stand by and watch it being crippled. Watch it being crippled rather than intervene as a government must and should do in order to shield ourselves from the consequences, sir, of industrial action. And I don't think people understand what they're talking about. I don't think people have weighed in the measure that if the workers' union decides to bring industrial action on this matter, who determines for them whether it is the airport they're going to shut down or not? They're going to bring everybody at the airport. All they're going to do is to shut down the tower. Who determines, Mr. Speaker, whether it is the seaport that is closed or not? And how many cruise ships and people that benefit from the cruise ships directly and indirectly will be compromised in this country? All because we must continue to put off and pretend to turn the other cheek against the gross indignity of our next door neighbors. Because even if you live in the heights and the terraces, Mr. Speaker, sir, you can look across the road and see the poor people. The island is that small. Our next door neighbors in the adjoining district are being exploited, but we keep on saying, ain't got nothing to do with me, them can wait. Wait another week. And we heard this with the minimum wage legislation. Oh, it's too soon. It was too early in the year to do it. But Mr. Speaker, sir, when was too soon to do the right thing? And the same question arises now. But we are playing a very dangerous game because all of us of good conscience know that advantage that this island has is because of the fact that we have been able to build a relationship, a wholesome relationship across races in Barbados, across classes in Barbados. There are some people who practice the tourism business in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, sir, that do so by having military escort, men with automatic rifles standing outside of a hotel, traveling on a tour bus or behind a tour bus when the bus is carrying passengers to one of the local attractions. You doubt me? Go to the Northern Caribbean and witness it for yourself, Mr. Speaker. That's a reality. But why did they get there? They got there because they failed to recognize that there comes a time when you have to speak truth to those employers who are practicing the art of labor management and industrial relations in a bad way. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say this. There are a number, in fact, I believe the vast majority of our hoteliers, the vast majority of our employers are playing by fair means and are decent. But we have allowed, sir, an element to come in. Now, the honourable member could mock the use of rogue. I heard the honourable member for St. Peter use the term rogue elements, and he was mocked in here for saying it. Well, I do not know what you call them. When somebody comes to Barbados, sir, and buys over a hotel in Barbados, as one instance did, and then, sir, you bring a practice that you were able to perpetuate in Trinidad to bear on Barbados' industrial climate, and you refuse, Mr. Speaker, at the front desk, where people are standing up for 8 hours, that they got to beg for a chair to sit down on in our Barbados, yours and mine, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you're begging for a chair to sit down on and you are told no. They go to the union. The union agitates as it must, but nothing don't happen. At what point then do we say enough is enough? Then, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are people who come into this country and would say that they would rather throw away food that is cooked and left back. They would rather put it in a plastic bag, Mr. Speaker, and throw it out, than enable the workers to have access to that meal. At what point do we say enough is enough, Mr. Speaker, sir? Uniforms. Mr. Speaker, you understand what people are arguing about in this country? Uniforms. That is a collective bargaining agreement that makes it clear that 3 times a year you should get a new uniform. And there are people who are saying that 1 time a year is enough. So you wear a black pants until it turns red. You have people that can't raise their arm comfortably, Mr. Speaker, it's got a hole in the armpit of the shirt. But then to get a new uniform, but they're to come to work at your place and represent your establishment as we greet guests and tell them what a wonderful hospitality Barbados has to offer. Who are we fooling, Mr. Speaker? And if the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association, which is replete, it is full of well-intentioned Barbadian men and women, but it seems to be powerless to stand up as a unit, an umbrella body, and say to some of its members that they are being delinquent. I don't want to say rogue, because it will offend my learned friend. But let's just say delinquent. If they don't stand up or have the intestinal or testicular fortitude to stand up and say, you are being delinquent, and this can't work out here, at what point then does government intervene? So I want us to be very clear about what we are doing and where we're at, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it isn't only about labor. There is another aspect of this that has concerned me, and that is the way in which private enterprise has arrogated unto itself, in some people's minds, the view that the only people who matter is the private sector. No, this country has to be balanced in terms of its growth. It has to be balanced in terms of, that's why we have a tripartite arrangement. And you know, I go back, sir, to say that one of the things that make Barbados stand out in the eyes of the international community is our tripartite arrangement, where we have the private sector, sitting at the table with government, sitting at the table with labor representatives, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the interest of the greater good, the greater efficiency, the greater competitiveness of the country that we live in and call Barbados. If I go to England, I'm told what a wonderful thing it is. When I'm in America, I'm told that it is unique. When I'm in Europe, Mr. Speaker, sir, outstanding, an example of what the best in industrial relations practice should be. And Mr. Speaker, sir, when we treat the private enterprise, I don't hear no quarrel. The Prime Minister spoke at length about the revision of the National Insurance Act, which we did in 2020 it was. There was no quarrel from private enterprise then. There was not a word of objection raised. $300 million placed at the disposal of the hotel sector in Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the intention was what? To green the hotels, make sure that they are now equipped with the photovoltaics, etc. Digitize, Mr. Speaker, sir, so that they themselves can be more efficient and more competitive. Oh, nobody objects to that. Mr. Speaker, sir, it included some training for the workers. It included, Mr. Speaker, sir, it included some training for the workers and different story. That, sir, in some cases, some parts of the hotels sector in Barbados, you have to search for that. Mr. Speaker, sir, we had the best program. I just mentioned the duty-free benefits that every hotel is entitled to get. And Mr. Speaker, sir, this government, responding again to capital and the needs of capital, has agreed that we will now make automatic those duty-free concessions. So that rather than having to wait on the Minister of Tourism, if he's traveling, to get back to Barbados to sign, you waiting for a week and grumbling and complaining that you can't get because the minister overseas. Because the minister ain't got nothing to do, he should be here sitting at his desk all day signing concessions for you. So we automatize it, and on a trust program, trust basis, because you come back and do an audit after, but on a trust basis, you say you're going to import X amount of money in lamb and steaks and lobster. Okay, fine, you're going to get your concession. You're importing X amount of money in liquor, worth of liquor, you're going to get your concession. This government, Mr. Speaker, did the same thing at the Bridgetown Port, where there's a trusted trader program at the Bridgetown Port that everybody importing from the private sector through the Bridgetown Port benefits from. And not a word of objection is ever raised when we do these things. But hear the shout. You start to speak about the balance, because the seesaw can't work if it is always down so. The seesaw gotta go the other way sometimes. And Mr. Speaker, sir, when it gotta go the other way in the interest of labor, it becomes a problem. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a source of concern. Now, when I tell you that this is what the collective bargaining agreement is trying to achieve, Mr. Speaker, sir, the question that I know people ask is, well, who it is that they're talking about in the hotels? And Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot of people in Barbados have not chosen, bothered themselves, cared enough about it. They go on social media and they will laud the bravery of he who stands up. As though the honourable member ain't accustomed to getting up. He who get up. And they laud his bravery. As though it is the first time he ever get up in his life. And Mr. Speaker, sir, they would not, I don't know if he was up for long or not, but I know, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is very unfair to the honourable member. It is very unfair to the honourable, and I will defend him. Even against my colleagues here, I'm going to defend him, sir. Because I know that in his heart of hearts, he would want some of the critics to go and look at the schedule to the agreement that we're talking about. Because that is what tells us all. The the class of Barbados, and I'm going to use the word class, and I'm not going to apologize for saying class in this house, sir, because this country has to accept that we are made up of a cross-section of classes. It is an economic division. That is what a class is. And there are certain classes in Barbados, sir, which are treated different to others.
Honourable Member, you have 2 more minutes.
No problem, sir. So that when, sir, we look at the schedule, we're talking about the cooks and the pantry workers. Nobody is to represent them. Mr. Speaker, sir, you look at the schedule, we're talking about the linen room attendant and the laundry room worker. We're talking about the maintenance men and the janitor, Mr. Speaker, sir. The gardeners, the bell persons, the beach attendants, the food and beverage cashier, the telephone operator, and the night porter, the general workers. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, these people are the salt of Barbados' earth. If you trace your lineage back, all of us will be able to say that we are a generation or 2 at most from them. Mr. Speaker, sir, are we to be the ones who betrayed them and their interests? I say no. I say no. And I cry shame on a country which has, at election time, the capacity to throw up 10 political parties, even if some of them are created out of the mist of the night. But not one, other than the Barbados Labour Party, sir, is raising its voice against these wrongs in Barbados. Not one. I cry shame on a country that can do that. And I stand, sir, you tell me I had 2 minutes, I will not abuse a second more of it. I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that...
I wouldn't allow you, Honourable Member. I wouldn't allow you.
I stand, sir, unapologetically alongside the Barbados Workers' Union General Secretary, the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Tourism, and any others in the breach against anybody who feels that there can be a Barbados in which we continue to gratuitously offend the workers of this country and not recognize that they are people with rights of citizenship in Barbados too. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start really where the Honourable Member for St. James Central ended. And I too will stand unapologetically with the Barbados Workers' Union, with the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union, the member for St. George North, and with the member for St. Peter, and for the with the Minister of Tourism. Because at no time, Mr. Speaker, could members of a Barbados Labour Party ever go against the labor of this country. But is it our name and is it our nature to represent the labor of this country? And we will do whatever we have to. Nowhere where we have to go, nowhere is sacrosanct. Whatever we have to do to be able to support the labor of this country, every member of the Barbados Labour Party on this side will do. And let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. This is a straight talk debate. This ain't a debate. Now, I ain't talk, as much as my friends there are learned members and want to talk points of law. I ain't talking points of law. I talking straight talk today. Now, first thing, let me say, Mr. Speaker, as much as we come here to this honorable chamber, and yes, sometimes we have levity. The Honourable Member for St. James Central adds levity, often talking about who will stand up and who will stand. I don't know what part he meant, but whatever getting up, I'm not sure. On feet, okay. But levity is important, but representation of people is a very, very serious matter. Very serious. When we all come into this honourable chamber, we all come in representing all of our constituents. Those who voted for us, those who didn't vote for us, and who did not vote at all. 8,000 people. Each of us come in here represent some more, some 9,000, some 10,000. I hear members saying they got 11,000. When you come to this honorable chamber, You are coming with the representation of thousands of people behind you. This is a serious, serious thing, because those people are relying on you to represent their interests. Those people are relying on you to represent their livelihoods. Those people are relying on you to safeguard their future. It's a very serious matter. And yes, we understand it. And we take on that responsibility. And we take on that responsibility to represent those people to the best of our ability. And that is why I say representation is a serious matter. Indeed, I used to be, and I guess I still am, the leader of the Christchurch team. I had 4 people that I used to lead. Now, one of my people who I led has reduced me now to leading 3 people and is a leader all on his own. And I understand that. I understand that these things happen and people decide that they have to represent and they feel that they want to choose other ways to go and their divergent paths. And we understand that. It is not the first time it's happened in this party. I saw the then member, previous leader of the opposition, who left the party, St. Michael West, and went over to the other side. So it's nothing unusual, but we understand it, and we as a party know what we have to do, just as he knows what he has to do. And we understand that. But I heard the honourable member speak about power and about the abilities of power and what power is, and whether a concession was property or not. And it made me think, in the same way as a prime minister has a power to appoint and disappoint, so does an opposition leader has a power to appoint and disappoint. He has the right and privilege to appoint and then later disappoint people to the other place. And has been exercised. And so therefore, when he appoints those people, in the same way that you decide to give somebody a concession, is that a property that they could then take to the bank? Because then he then can disappoint or revoke their appointment. So clearly that is not a property. And in the same way, a concession could not be. Because in the same way that you give a concession, you can revoke that concession to which you give. So I went to law school, but I could read occasionally, and I understand a few things, like most of the members in here. And, well, they tell me that I knew I was supposed to know to speak French. And quelque chose meant something. So therefore, I could deduce that chose meant thing. But don't let me digress and get into that. I remember from St. James Central. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that, and when somebody cannot find a fundamental issue with what we are proposing, then they go to process. And we understand that. We understand that. In fact, it is the lifeblood of the same Barbados Workers Union. Process, process, process. And everybody must follow process. And no wonder the honourable member for St. George North said that her organization keeps very, very good notes, because the very, very good notes stand to understanding process. And I understand it and I get it. But clearly, and although the honourable member went to process, I heard him very, very clearly to say that nobody, no right-thinking person would stand in the way of protecting the salt of the earth of this country, the labor of this country. And I heard the honourable member talk about being on the right side of history. I am going to be on the right side of history today. I am going to be on the right side of history today. Because if I were not my father would come out of his grave and haunt me. Haunt me. Would come out of his grave and haunt me. I don't remember he's trying to heckle me after I've said such good words about him, but I will not hear the aside.
Honourable member, I was seated, it doesn't happen.
Thank you. Because,
Can't
Mr.
happen,
Speaker,
Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, my father brought me up to be a man of integrity. And integrity, Mr. Speaker, is what you do when people are not looking. What you do when people are not looking. And that's what integrity is about. And it's one of the reasons that I came and offered myself as a member of Parliament for this country. Because I came here as a member of Parliament to represent the people I grew up with. Like Rodney, the pool attendant, and I'm sorry for calling the name, but it's all in the first name. Rodney, the pool attendant at Glitter Bay. Worked in the hotel industry for years and pulled himself up. Like Winnie, the waitress from Dayton. If she's hearing me, she will know who I mean. That worked for years at the then Holiday Inn. There's the people that we come to represent, though. And that is why we are here today, to make sure that there is a minimum standard that people like them, and it's not a nebulous name in Labour, these are people that I know and grew up with. I could not stand idly by and see them treated badly. If I have an opportunity to stand up and do something for them, I will do it. And I know what I say is what is felt by all of the members on this Barbados Labour Party side. And I hope it used to be felt by the member for Christchurch South. I don't know if it's still felt by him. You know, Mr. Speaker, there's a man called Richard Branson. Forgive me for using the full name. So Richard Branson started a company, used to sell music and sell posters and so on, built it to being an international company, Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, now Virgin Galactic, going into space. And you know what he said? You know what he said, Mr. Speaker? He said this, and I ain't going to quote it incorrectly, so I went and researched it and wrote it down. He said, clients do not come first. Employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the clients. That is what Sir Richard Branson said. A man that has, 10,000, I don't know how many thousands of employees. A man that built company after company after company not because he treated his employees badly, but because he treated his employees well. Treating your employees well does not affect the detriment your balance sheet. He has proven that treating your employees well attributes to the benefit of your balance sheet. And I'm not talking about asymmetric growth, where the management and the owners grow and the employees grow a little bit. I'm talking about everybody growing together. And that's basically what this is about. What we have to do is make sure, and this is not for all work out, you know something? Really and truly, all people, all employers in Barbados should be looking to treat their employees well. But right now, this legislation is only for those who get concessions and contracts from government. That's what this is. And all over the world, if you look at the legislation in the United States, and you want to be a contractor for the government of the United States, you know what they say? In order for you to be a contractor, you got to comply with occupational health and safety. You got to comply with overtime. You got to pay people this amount of minimum wage. You can look at it in Canada, in the United States, in England, Australia. Look up the legislation. All over the place, it is the same. So it's nothing unusual that we are asking. If you want to benefit from a concession, if you want to benefit from the taxpayers' money, but some of the same taxpayers are your employees, give them a chance by treating them fairly. That is what this legislation is doing. And that is exactly what we have come to do. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for St. Peter went through some of the legislation that it covers. Employment rights, sexual harassment rights, labor clauses, Labor Department Act, protection of wages. If you contravene those pieces of legislation, then those pieces of legislation have certain remedies, whatever they may be, fines, whatever they may be, that you contravene those pieces of legislation. But what this does is this says, in addition to if you contravene those rights of the workers, you cannot continue to benefit from concessions. So that in addition to whatever these remedies are, there's an additional remedy. So yes, you decide that you are going to contravene the employment rights, or you're going to contravene the occupational health and safety, or whatever it is. They got a little penalty. You decide, well, I could contravene it, but I could afford to pay that penalty, and I can move on. Not with this legislation. If this legislation, you contravene the rights of the worker, and in addition to any penalties under that act, you also will lose the concession or the contract that you are getting or you were benefiting from. And that's what this legislation does. And whether we like it or not, people feel it most when you hit them in the pocket. You hit them in the pocket. Now, I cannot imagine, I cannot conceive, I cannot believe that there are hoteliers in this country that would want to disadvantage their workers. I cannot conceive it. Because that, in its essence, those are your agents. Those are the people that interact with your guests. Those are the people that want to make your guests come back for a second, third, and fourth time. And if you treat your employees badly, and they're having a bad day because you treat them bad, because they're going to the lunchroom and they're in a chair to sit down pan, or the lunchroom dirty, or they didn't have enough time to get lunch, or the lunch was bad, and then they say, well, I ain't feeling good, and then they take that and carry it on to the guests. Well, you spiting yourself. Well, you ain't spiting the employee, you're spiting yourself, because they will knock that on to the guests. And it makes absolutely no sense. And I can't imagine that they would do that. Or if they're doing that, stop it now. Make wrong things right. Make wrong things right. And let the people of Barbados see that you're making wrong things right. And that's what this is about. You know, sometimes moral suasion works, and people listen to moral suasion, and they do what is right. Sometimes moral suasion does not work. And then when moral suasion does not work, then a government has to go to legislation. And it is obvious and clear that the two ministers tried ad nauseum at moral suasion. Did not work. So therefore, they then had to go to legislation. The legislation will work, I have no doubt, because this legislation is about leveling the playing field and making it right for workers. Now I can't call him my learned friend, I have to call him the honourable member on the other side, says that everybody has a right to be wrong. Everybody, I made a note very clearly. Everybody has a right to be wrong. And he defended his right to be right, and maybe he is going to defend his right to be wrong. And Only time will tell whether his decision was a right one or a wrong one. Because all members in this house have a date with destiny. And the last member that left the bosom of the Barbados Labour Party and decided to take that decision that the current member has taken, has proven, because he is no longer in this honourable chamber, that his right to be wrong was correct and he was wrong.
I remember, I know that very well. I know that extremely well. I remember he got 267 votes.
Oh, okay.
I know that very well. Very well.
So,
that's all the votes he got.
in the same way that the honourable member has a right to be wrong, I don't know if that he is going to be right or if he's going to be wrong. But I do know that all will be shown in the fullness of time, because that always happens. Time is the great equalizer. Time is the great equalizer. And so today is a historic day. Today is a day that we have debated legislation that will go down in history. Today is a day and a reason that I came to this honourable house to protect and defend those who cannot speak for themselves. To protect and defend those people that I grew up with. And I saw the sweat and the tears that they would have given in service to the hotel sector and the tourism industry. And Mr. Speaker, let us think not now as politicians. Let us think not now of political parties. Let us think about conscience as human beings. Conscience. At the end of the day, yes, you may be educated. Yes, you may have opportunities that your fellow Barbadians did not have. But you have to have a conscience. Yes, you may have been blessed to inherit a hotel or buy a hotel or manage a hotel. But you must have a conscience. A conscience to understand that human beings deserve to be treated with dignity. Dignity. And that's what this is about. Let us treat our fellow human beings with dignity. Let us have that basic minimum of how they must be treated. Be it their wages, be it their terms of service, be it their lunchtime. I found it hard to believe that in Barbados people get in 30 minutes for lunch. I found that hard because all over Barbados, everybody knows it was an hour. And they need to get an hour. So, let me go back. Conscience. Have a conscience. Treat people properly. Treat people properly. Treat people with dignity. And understand, Mr. Speaker, that at the end of the day, whether you are up here or whether you're down here, the size of the hole you're going to be the same. Going to be the same. You're only here for a time. So let us treat those that we interact with to the best of our ability. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to be able to join this debate this evening in order to give my full support to this concessions bill. And I'll explain why, Mr. Speaker. I'm the MP for St. James South. And one of the things that has been hurtful to me over the past 2 or 3 years has been young women coming to me who are working in the hotel sector and who are saying to me and expressing to me the terms and conditions that they're meeting. That some of them, one young woman said to me that they were just getting 3- and 6-month contracts, and the contract broken and being rehired, and you don't know from day to day whether you would still have a job. You can't plan your life. Another young woman came to me and she said, I'm only getting 3 days of work. I have a young child. What I am being paid is not allowing me to be able to take that child to daycare, catch a bus and get to work, and put food on my table and keep a roof over my head. Ms. Husbands, it is not making any sense for me to remain in the hotel industry. And then I had a number of them said to me that even with COVID finishing, making the determination that they were not going back into the hotel industry because they felt the hotel industry had nothing to offer them. And I said, there has to be something going on that is causing an honorable industry that has employed thousands of Barbadians and provided a living for loads of Barbadians to now become a place where workers now do not feel that this is a place where they can advance their lives and take care of their families. And so when the investigations were done and I heard the various complaints, the decisions that were being made that were affecting workers and preventing them from finding within the hotel industry a place where they could grow, I knew, sir, that it was time that something needed to be done. And so I was pleased because I've raised it any number of times. What are we doing about those businesses that are unfairing workers and making life miserable and untenable for them and creating misery in their homes? So I was pleased when this piece of legislation is being presented in order for us to address those practices that work and mitigate against the well-being of Barbadians. But, sir, further investigation of the phenomena helps us to understand that what is driving these behaviors and these practices that we see creeping in to our businesses is really a dynamic that is going on outside of our borders, where we are seeing across the world capital looking for places where they can land, where they can get cheap labor, where they can get concessions, and where they can operate their business in a way that they cannot operate at home because they have to comply with the laws in their own home, they have to comply with the regulations, and they have to be able to meet the wage bills that they need to meet in order to satisfy the worker in their own country. They could not do it in their own places of abode. And so what you have across the world is billions of dollars of capital looking for places to land. Now, sir, let me put the caveat. All investors looking for new places to locate are not bad, are not seeking to unfair people, are not seeking to do wrong by the people in developing countries. But I can tell you that there are enough of the bad ones that have had a negative impact across the developing world. And what has occurred in many economies, sir, is that as a result of people being able to go in, get concessions, pay low rates, don't obey any environmental regulations, no health and safety legislation, etc., what occurs is that you end up with poor working conditions and low wages. And why is this allowed? It's allowed because sometimes you have governments that feel their back is against the wall and that they cannot negotiate that which is in the best interest of their people. And so there's a lack of enforcement of labor standards, even if it is sitting on the law books. They're under political pressure sometimes to find a job, any job, so they grab at whoever comes and allows them to come and set up in their countries just so they could win an election. When you have weak governments, you also have situations where they turn a blind eye, where businesses are refusing to allow workers to join unions and are not allowing for labor to be able to choose who they want, to recognize them and help them to represent their interests. And so you have that suppression of labor unions. And so what is the end result of this? And the reason why I'm sharing this, because I want people to understand this is not just a problem for workers. This affects the viability of the entire country, and I want to explain how and why. When you have a significant portion of your population earning low wages and operating in poor work conditions, sir, what happens is that the first thing that occurs is that you have people whose spending power is reduced. Once their spending power is reduced, the other enterprises in your economy that depend on them for their profitability cannot be sustainable because they cannot make sufficient money because people are not working for sufficient wages to keep consumption and demand going in your economy. So therefore, the weakness and the degradation begins to spread out across all of your enterprises and affects not just the workers in the primary industry, tourism, it spreads itself out across all of the other sectors. The second impact is that it affects the taxpayer. Here you have taxpayers giving up significant revenue. In Barbados, it's over $750 million. But what does that mean? It means that the domestic taxpayer then has to carry the burden and the cost of ensuring that we take care of the services, deal with infrastructure, provide for education, deal with welfare. And that increased taxation on the taxpayers limits their capacity to take care of their homes, to take care of the dreams of their children, because they are paying increased taxes, carrying the burden of enterprises that are operating in their space. And therefore, this is one of the reasons why it is important that when companies come and you give them concessions, they must play their part. They must do what is necessary in order to ensure that they give back in another way into the economy that is supporting them and helping them to make a dollar. And that means buying local goods and services as much as you can, and paying decent wages, giving decent hours and decent working conditions to your employees. And it means being a good corporate citizen, looking for charitable opportunities where you are going to be able to take some of what you have earned at the expense of the taxpayer in that country, put some back by supporting charitable organizations. That is what has to happen. Because when you do not do that, you rob a country, you haven't helped it. And then the further long-term effect, Mr. Speaker, is when your supplier companies are not growing, when your workers are not earning and therefore can't spend, new businesses can't emerge. Your young people cannot find opportunities for work because new businesses cannot come, because the economy is stagnating, because what you're doing is allowing a pariah to operate within the space. And what it's doing, it is choking the economic health and the economic well-being of that country. And that is why I say to Barbadians, all of us have to be concerned about this. All of us have to support the workers in this country. All of us must support the unions in this effort to ensure that we provide decent wages and decent work in Barbados. Now, where is the Barbados government on this? Mr. Speaker, working in international trade and discussing with other countries across the world, I have seen what has been the long-term economic impact of irresponsible investors operating in a space, taking advantage of a country. We all know of the situations where a country has minerals and they get next kin to nothing for it, etc. So it is not easy for a small developing nation like Barbados to find a way to carve a path through an economic field where the rules of engagement have been set by capital and it is affecting your capacity to be able to generate a living for your people. But what did Barbados do? And I want people to understand these concessions, that the concessions are not just about righting the wrong. It is part of a whole path that we are creating to be able to take Barbados forward. And what is that? We recognize that if we have a small country and a limited population, it is imperative that everybody can earn the best possible dollar, because you only have a few citizens to carry the cost of the operations. So it is necessary that we produce for the country investment opportunities that bring decent work and good wages. And what has Barbados done? In seeking to attract the right type of investment to Barbados, because we said we were not going to the race to the bottom, that was not where we were going to operate. What happened across the region between 2020 and 2023, there have been some investment fora that were set up in the region where we went all out, along with our CARICOM neighbors, to attract investors from all across the world in various areas so that we can get the best quality type investment to be able to give the opportunity of a good living to our people. And so there were investment conferences here in Barbados. We had it in Trinidad, we had it in Guyana, we had it in Bahamas. We also had the opportunity to go to Africa and to be able to share some of the opportunities that were available in Barbados, because we are serious about attracting the right investment so that the average Barbadian can look forward to decent work and a decent life. That's one part of that strategy. The second part of the strategy, sir, was to invest in education. If you're going to go after higher skills and you're going to attract quality investment, paying good money, giving people decent work and decent jobs, it is important that the skills are available in the country in order for that company to be assured that they can find a workforce that is capable of executing that which they have asked them to do. That's the only way to attract high-paying investment. And so we've been making investments in education, in technical and vocational training. We've done investments in the NTI, the National Transformation Initiative. The Honourable Member for St. Philip West can share with you the work that they have done in terms of bringing opportunities in artificial intelligence and in cybersecurity that will guarantee Barbadians salaries of $5,000 a month, $2,500 a month. They get 3 months of training, 6 months of training, and then they're guaranteed a job, and so they're able to earn the kind of money that will allow them to properly take care of their families and to contribute overall to the tax base of Barbados. And more will be coming. So that's the work that is being done. We're also doing reforms and deconstructing and reconstructing at our technical colleges to make sure that we identify the types of skills that are needed and we ensure that every Barbadian has the opportunity to acquire those skills so that they can get those jobs. We have also, the other plank in your strategy has to be the support of collective bargaining. People in this country must feel that they have freedom of association, that they can band together under the banner of a union, a responsible union, may I add, so that they are negotiating on their behalf the terms and conditions that will allow them to attract to their lives a quality work, a quality career, a quality job. These are the things that are important. And that is why the labor clauses are critical. And then you have to have the regulatory framework, you have to have the legislation that allows you to ensure that companies honor their agreement. that they meet their obligations both to the workers and to the taxpayers. But I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. If that strategy is to work and to produce the end result, which is good paying jobs for Barbadians, Barbadians able to look forward to a decent life, young people look forward to being able to get an opportunity when they come out from school, that they can acquire the skills that are of interest to them and that they can fit into the jobs that we're able to attract here in Barbados. If that strategy is to work, then this entire country has to work together to create the conditions to make it successful. A country, sir, is like a car. It has 4 wheels. And if the 4 wheels do not work together in harmony, if they do not work together on the same goal, if they don't each perform the tasks that they're to perform, then the strategy cannot work. We have a saying in Barbados that we've never forgotten. Tourism is our business, let us play our part. But every single member of the country has to play his or her part. Government has to play its part by seeking that quality investment and creating the fair environment. Business has to play its part by being efficient, doing good business, and giving people good terms and conditions, treating their workers right. Workers have to play their part. They have to reduce the absenteeism. They have to raise quality. They have to produce good work and excellent service. And they have to be able to collaborate as a team in order to help make the enterprise successful. Unions have to do their part in representing the workers to rectify any conditions that need rectifying and collaborating with the other partners to arrive at the very best decision that is in the interest of getting the country forward, because we are all wheels on that car. And therefore, there is a mutual interest in all of us benefiting. Because at the end of the day, you have to maintain that proper balance in your economy by having all 4 parties work together to help make it work. And this Barbados Labour Party is playing its part this afternoon by dealing with this legislation and making sure that we prevent the exploitation of workers in this country. I believe, sir, that as we put the legislation in place, as we ensure the regulations are designed, and that we do the enforcement that is necessary, that eventually all of those young women out there who are feeling hopeless because they see themselves having 2 small children, cannot find a job that would earn enough that they could actually get the child care that they need, and still have enough left to be able to rent a home and put food on the table and pay the bills. I am praying that as that legislation is enforced, that we will create better conditions that will again attract workers to one of our most important industries, the tourism industry. And I pray that as they work, they help to take Barbados to its highest heights by allowing tourism to be that catalyst around which the other businesses are able to benefit and prosper, and all of us can live in peace and harmony. So I salute the bill, and I look forward to its enactment, and I look forward to its enforcement. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Christchurch Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give my absolute support to this bill, and to remind the country, through you, sir, that whilst the presentation by the Honourable Member for St. Peter was clear in its intent, the broader context given by the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central was even more clear. I recall very clearly, sir, in March of 2020, and you will remember, sir, when a particular restaurant chain, sir, in the dead of night, sir, abruptly announced that all 149 employees, sir, across that chain, there were 3 restaurants, sir. You remember. I do not remember, sir, at that point, any business association, sir, distanced themselves from the way those workers, sir, were treated at that time. Admittedly, sir, 2 weeks later, we entered a lockdown with respect to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so from my point of view, sir, as I was trying to figure out then what could we do, sir, to at least bring some level of sanction to the way that that company treated those workers, we had to change our focus almost immediately to trying to ensure, sir, that we can steer this country through a very serious global pandemic. And so my only regret, sir, in being here today is that we didn't have an opportunity, sir, to complete this work sooner. Because the granting of concessions, sir, and I just want to make it abundantly clear, sir, that tax revenue, taxation, sir, is not by any stretch of the imagination property, unless, sir, you believe you're a king directing the public to render unto you, sir, what is yours, sir. This is not a realm, sir, by any stretch of the imagination. And therefore, I reject out of hand, sir, any concept that tax revenue, whether coming in to the Treasury or foregone by the Treasury, sir, could ever be conceptualized as property. No, sir. Tax policy is the domain, sir, of the Ministry of Finance. And long may that remain so, sir. The level of taxes paid, sir, in this country is determined by the Ministry of Finance, sir. And so too, the ratios or proportions, sir, of any revenue foregone is also, sir, determined by the Ministry of Finance. And so therefore, I say to all Barbadians that this matter that we are discussing here today, sir, is important because we have tried to create, sir, an environment that is so-called conducive for doing business. And we are committed, sir, to so doing. But the treatment, sir, of workers, the treatment of Barbadians by entities, sir, and I believe, sir, whether you enjoy concessions or not, you should treat your workers properly, sir. The fact that you are profiting, sir, and I know, sir, and we have now developed the capacity within the Customs Department, sir, to do some audits, and we have started those audits, sir. I know, and I say I know, sir, because I believe in my heart, in my gut, sir, that whilst we may give concessions, sir, for a specific purpose, I have not seen the evidence yet, sir, that will lead me to conclude that the pricing associated with the granting of those concessions, sir, are consistent with the intent of the policy. Meaning, sir, I believe that some businesses are still pricing their goods and services as if they were charged the duties and taxes, sir, commensurate with coming through the port. But we are developing that capacity, sir. We're going to be working very closely with the Department of Commerce, sir, to understand what is really happening in Barbados. And so to the extent that we're here speaking specifically there about the treatment of workers, sir, because if it is found, sir, imagine, sir, I'm sure you can imagine, sir, a scenario where if you can keep noise about treating workers right, convene a whole meeting, sir, to discuss the idea of treating workers right in relation to concessions, sir, then it tells me, sir, that these other matters are not being taken seriously by some across the business community. And from a regulatory perspective, sir, the Ministry of Finance, working with the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Agriculture, sir, the Ministry of Energy and Business, sir, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Health, and all the other ministries under whom specific piece of legislation grant concessions. We are going to work collaboratively, sir, because the idea that the government is coming after people or things like that, sir, is a misnomer. It really is a misnomer. Because people come and say, Minister, we want to do this. We're going to make $300 million in investment, sir. We're going to have 2,000 jobs during construction and 5,000 jobs during operation. We're just calling this a number, sir. And then you're going to earn $200 million in foreign exchange every year coming into the coffers, sir, tax revenues of XYZ. And then when you check, sir, the concessions are granted. And when you check, sir, nothing could be further from the truth. And therefore, it has to be clearly understood, sir, that the context in which we are operating today, we now have to ensure that we tighten up. Because the abuse that we have seen in some instances, sir, it has to stop. So permit me, sir, just to share a few numbers with you, because I want people to understand that when one business could determine that they can overnight decide that they can so-called close down, 149 people, sir, on the bright line, just like that, no explanation, sir. It is wrong, sir. It is wrong. And nobody should ever, sir, be associated with that or seek to defend that, sir. And this Barbados Labour Party, sir, we are going to make sure that things like that if it happened again, that we have the necessary legal authority, sir, to make sure that we bring those, sir, persons to account. Because this cannot be, sir, something that takes root in this country. And I mean that, sir. As sure as I stand up here, sir, I mean that. Now, I just want to go back, sir, and just give a few numbers, because it's important for people to appreciate and understand that we didn't come to this because of some overnight thing. Sir, in 2020, which was the year of the pandemic, sir, when the pandemic started, the value of tax concessions foregone, sir, in that year was $585 million, sir. In 2021, sir, $613 million, sir. In 2022, sir, $784 million in 2022, sir. And in 2023, sir, $802 million in foregone revenue, sir, tax concessions, sir, across a range of sectors. Most of that, sir, through how the data is categorized, sir, the Ministry of Finance. But most of the entities within that specific category, so, sir, the tourism sector, as you would appreciate. Now, to avoid any mischief, sir, because people read things in the newspapers and on social media, sir, and it starts to create concern and fear, and therefore I want to set the record straight immediately, sir, in relation to small business. And I want to make that abundantly clear, sir, from the outset. Because this bill affects every business, sir, that benefits from a concession. Now, as you know, sir, the Small Business Act says specifically that you get a specific tax rate, sir, a differential tax rate on the basis of being an approved small business, and therefore that should not be confused, sir, in relation to the idea of concessions. However, there are some small businesses, sir, under the administration of these concessions that benefit from concessions, and I just want to make it clear, sir, the quantum of these concessions to which we refer. But any entity has to comply with treating the workers properly, whether it's a small business, sir, or big business. And the truth is, sir, every business in the country should be able to do that. But in 2020, sir, just for the record, small businesses under the Small Business Development Act, sir, $222,000, sir, in 2020. 167,000, sir, of the numbers that I spoke of before. So 222,000, sir, of 585 million in 2020. 167,000, sir, in 2021 of 613 million, sir. 262,000, sir, in 2022 of 784. 219,000, sir, of 802 in 2023. And I make that point, sir, so that small businesses in this country or people don't try to seek to create fear in people's minds, sir. Because from a risk management perspective, sir, and what the audits in terms of what we substantively are looking at, sir, with respect to the monitoring of these concessions, sir, really the small businesses in terms of the quantum in which they receive concessions, sir, they will continue to do right by the employees, sir, because small businesses are well aware, sir, that if you don't deal with your workers properly, sir, you can get all kinds of stress. So I want to give the assurance that from a risk management perspective, sir, risk management, that our ability to be able to reduce these tax expenditures lies squarely, sir, with where the risk truly lies. And therefore, the extent to which either people are getting concessions and not using them for the purpose for which they intended, that is the basis upon which, sir, we are, the Ministry of Finance, working with Customs and the Department of Commerce, will be focusing, sir, in relation to the audits. So I am happy, sir, that as the last few years we have said to investors, well, you're getting these concessions, so therefore you really have to make sure that your statutory obligations, sir, are up to date. And the standards that now will be set industry by industry by industry, sir, that those standards as they come in, sir, will accompany, sir, any concessions that the Ministry of Finance grants in relation to these matters. And therefore, this legislation, sir, is absolutely important because we have to create more order within the economy, and the extent to which people, I said to ICAP this morning, sir, the majority of businesses, this legislation, sir, the majority of businesses that access concessions, as we check the data in relation to the submissions for PAYE, national insurance, and the like, sir, the pattern of behavior suggests, sir, that the majority of businesses really will not be impacted at all by this. Because people that are doing the things orderly, regularly, sir, are not typically the people that would then go and do these funny business things that you see there. Now, that is not to say, sir, that there may not be a few anomalies in the pot. But the majority of people who habitually, sir, ensure that they pay their taxes on time and do their things on time, so understand the compact that they've made with respect to the granting, to the accession of concessions, and being a good corporate citizen, sir. And therefore, good corporate citizenry, must be the ethos of any business that wants to come to Barbados. And that is the kind of culture that we want to be able to bring to the fore, because if Barbados is to be world-class, sir, then in every facet of everything that we do, every facet, sir. So if you expect people, sir, to come and put in 150% today, tomorrow, and the next day, sir, then it means that the environment within which they're operating, they must feel and see the benefits of doing that. And therefore, sir, as you know, sir, we passed legislation here to deal with whistleblowing, sir. And you know full well that if people working in businesses know that you're getting a concession, there's an opportunity for them to go and be able to make the report anonymously, sir, such that either the Labor Department, the Ministry of Finance, or whoever it is under that act, sir, will be able to say, as the honourable member was questioning who was going to be responsible, we are all responsible, sir. Because as government, it is our duty, sir, to defend the public interest. And you will recall, sir, we amended Cap 67B, sir, to put in a specific definition, sir, for the granting of concessions to be in the public interest. And that bill, sir, was debated in here last year. Last year. To include the definition, sir, of being in the public interest. So that when businesses come to apply for concessions, sir, to the Ministry of Finance, we go through it and determine, sir, whether or not this is actually in the public interest. And therefore, all of us, sir, whether you're in the Ministry of Labour, Tourism, Education, Health, whatever it is, sir, those ministers, the public officials, sir, they have a duty, sir, they have a duty to defend the public interest. And in the same way that all of us, sir, all of us have access either free at the point of delivery, sir, education, free at the point of delivery, sir, health. We all enjoy the collective protection, sir, of the Barbados Police Service. We all enjoy the collective protection, sir, of the Defense Force. We all, there are some individual things that we consume as taxpayers, but then there are some collective things, sir, that we cannot escape. And therefore, when I quote these numbers, sir, of the revenue foregone that is climbing, and we're going to claw back some, but we're not, the mechanism that we were using before will now be enhanced by this. Because where there are infractions, it is not as if we're going to just simply take it away overnight, sir. We shall give you a period of time to make yourself right, make wrong things right, as we would say, sir. But whilst you're making wrong things right, there will be a reduction, sir, in relation to what it is you're benefiting from. And therefore, to the extent that you want to get on the right side of things, you can't have a situation, sir, where you have one set of people doing right by their people, by their staff, boosting morale, motivating people, and people wanting to get up and come work, sir, when the day comes. And then another set of people, sir, who can care less, sir, about their staff, but yet enjoying the same level of access. There's something wrong about that, sir. Something fundamentally wrong about that. And therefore, the government is simply saying, this is the minimum, the bare minimum that any reasonable person, sir, would accept. And I'm happy to associate myself with this legislation. As I said, sir, I'm sorry that the pandemic came and we didn't get to do it in 2020, sir, 4 years ago. Because this, the way that some people forget, and they forget quickly, sir, because, you know, I tell you, in 4 years, the people that meet yesterday forgot about them 149 people that overnight, sir, were just thrown by the wayside. Thrown by the wayside, sir, without any regard for their family situation or anything, sir. And, sir, you know what's the hard thing? It ain't like there was a fire. It wasn't like something catastrophic happened overnight, and therefore the business thing, sir. They even had employed people, sir, the day before, knowing that people quit the job one place, sir, to come to take up work with you. And you ain't even had the decency, sir, to telling people, no, don't quit your job, stay where you are. Took on people for 2-3 days, and next thing you know, people turn up, place shut up, sir, all three. That's not the kind of business that we want to do in Barbados, sir. That's not the kind of business we want to attract in Barbados. And therefore, it is important that as a society, everybody keeps saying Barbados is all of a sudden now, you know, the economy, society thing now starting to come back. And they're hearing it a little more and more, the society. But this is the part of the society that you got to deal with, sir. This is the part of the society you got to deal with. So when you got rogue elements out there, so you got to deal with them. You got to excise them, sir. Excise. And whilst I am on my feet, sir, I must say to you that given the new configuration in this chamber, sir, I got up this morning, sir, and I came down the road, sir, with a pep in my step. Because when you have to confront things for what they are. And you know, sir, my grandmother always tell me, believe people when they show you who they are, sir. She told me that. She told me that. And I know all of us, sir, in the Bible will be well aware, sir, that in every 12, sir, in every 12, there's a Judas. And that statistic, sir, should not be in any way, sir, in any way lost on anybody in this place, because you have, sir, to understand what is in your midst. And I am absolutely confident, sir, I'm absolutely confident that when the time comes, the people in that other place, sir, will determine their representation. And if from what I see, sir, if from what I see and what I observe is what it is, then it tells me, sir, one thing, that any idea of aligning oneself with that place is not just an insult, sir, to all of us in here who work hard, sir, to repair the reputation of Barbados, who work hard, sir, to repair the damage that was done by the other party, sir, and to bring some measure of self-respect, sir, back to this country. I say to the people of Barbados that you watch us, judge us, sir, by our actions. Judge us by what we do. Judge us, sir, by whom we associate with, sir, because in no way, sir, could it be right, could it be proper, in any way, sir, to come now and say that there's lack of trust in this government and to associate oneself, sir, with the other side. And with those few words, sir, I want you to know the battle lines have been drawn and there shall be no quarter given. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I came into this chamber this morning, and the member for St. James Central gave me the title as the 12th man today. But somehow, I rise not as 12th man, but to give my voice to this bill, Labor Clause Concession Bill 2024. And I wish to start by saying, Mr. Speaker, that the greatest development as a country has always taken place during the periods when workers' voices were at their strongest. Check the history of this country. The greatest development in this country has always taken place when workers' voices and labor were at their strongest. And Mr. Speaker, the culture of fighting for workers' rights came out of the bosom of the Barbados Labour Party. And Mr. Speaker, I start there because when I came to public life in 2018, we created a manifesto prior to 2018. And we vow in that manifesto, and you all can reference it, even the member for Christchurch South. I'm not sure if you can find the page, I can find it for him. And it speaks to workers' rights. And it spoke to the trade union movement in Barbados and the strong culture of workers' rights that I mentioned that has resulted, came directly from the bosom of the Labour Party. And Mr. Speaker, we vow as a government then that we will not put the workers of this country through those days 1991 to 1994, or 2008 to 2018. We vow. That was a vow. It was written in our manifesto. Because those were some of the darkest days as it relates to exploitation of workers in this country, treatment of workers. And Mr. Speaker, while one can debunk and one can criticize the communist Karl Marx believed that human labor was the only common characteristic shared by all goods and services in exchange on a market. Karl Marx believed that the value of a commodity or a good was directly related to the number of labor hours by man or woman in a job to build that commodity, and it transcends to services. So if we look at the Karl Marx theory, Mr. Speaker, and the value that he placed on labor in terms of labor power, labor productivity in producing a good. And I'm no communist by any way, but sometimes you can take the positive from whatever historical socialist or communist who would have opined and hypothesized over the years. And I think that was in the 19th century. Political scientist member for St. James Central. You're the only political scientist in here. So, Mr. Speaker, on that basis, I enter this debate as a proud member of the Barbados Labour Party in supporting its philosophy. And let me pause and thank the member for St. Peter. Sir, you didn't come from Jordan Hill, but today reminded me of those nights you spent in Jordan Hill. And indeed, I enjoyed the discourse this morning. The member for St. Michael West Central, the member for St. George North, my two brilliant senior ministers who spoke earlier, member for St. James Central and Christchurch West. So that's why he was chosen as 12th man. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I came from the private sector, and it would be remiss of me. I represent a large constituency, and I wrote here, I can pull my notes week after week, week after week, and hear the cries of tourism and hotel workers who came to that lovely office in Ellerton, St. George, to meet with me, to say to me, they want a government job. You know, and it bothers me because I came from the private sector, and I enjoyed a very good career in the private sector. And I tried to instill in them, not knowing the gravity of what they were faced with, to ask them to stay in the private sector. I came from a manufacturing environment where labor was valued, and I can say that labor was probably the second largest input to the manufacture of that product that I produced for close to 20 years. Fuel was the highest input, and the second largest input was labor. And I want to thank those trade unionists that I sat across the table from who instilled certain values in me, because I learned on the job as well. Don't think because we went to university and we are lawyers for over 30 years and we come in here and we keep saying that and we are engineers for all these years. I learned the art of negotiating and industrial relations from the likes of Salee Roy Trotman, Bobby Morris, Dennis Clark, and my good friend, the late Levi Richards. And it was a baptism of fire Because what they were instilling in us as managers, young managers of workers, treat your workers fairly, and you will see how productivity would improve. And while most of the times we lost on process, we came away with a lesson. And that is why I'm a strong supporter of the member for St. George North. That speech this morning, member for St. George North, it gives excessive power to the people of this country, the workers' rights. And what we fought for, the Grantley Adams, and the Tom Adams, and the Wayne Arthur, and the member for St. Michael North East, what she's fighting for daily. I don't have much time on this floor, Mr. Speaker, but I want to look at the guiding principles of labor laws. I heard the member for Christchurch South, very eloquent. He was always that way. Speaks exceptionally well. He commands the English language. He took this debate to the law courts. Where is Corey Street? Hey, what's the street now? It is Robert Street or Corey Street? He took the debate to White Park Road. But I'm going to speak for the next 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker. And I would refer him when I'm finished, because I can still teach you something. You can teach me a lot, and I can still teach you something on the principles guiding labor laws. And there are three: human dignity, social justice, and economic efficiency. Those are the three guiding principles of labor law. So you can bring all the law from Corey Street as it relates to workers' rights. Those are the three guiding principles of labor laws. Human dignity, Mr. Speaker, refers to the intrinsic value and worth of every individual. And labor laws, Mr. Speaker, aim to protect the dignity of workers by ensuring that they are not exploited or mistreated. And that was, again, the philosophy of Karl Marx. His theory based fundamentally on preventing workers being exploited by the masses. I researched it. Member for St. James Central agrees with me, I know that. He's a George Bell scholar. But I move on to economic efficiency. Don't have much time. What is economic efficiency? It aims to maximize productivity and profitability while ensuring that the workers receive fair wages and benefits. Human dignity, economic efficiency. There's no reason why you should seek to maximize profits at the expense of workers' rights, treatment of workers, health and safety. I heard the member for St. James Central spoke about hotel workers not wanting to give them 3 sets of uniform per year. So these are the workers who, in my view, they're not the second largest input into that industry. To me, they're the largest input and the most important input into the most important sector in this country, the tourism and the hotel sector. But yet you are telling me that you're going to dive into the service charges and you want to treat them like cattle in the 21st century. When Karl Marx back in the 19th century spoke about this, dismiss it, exploitation. And we today, as a people, want not to advocate, some of us. And member for Christchurch South, I really don't want to lose respect for you. And I hope that you would never, ever advocate against fair treatment of workers. Because you signed in 2018, just like the former member for St. Michael West, you signed next to me. You signed next to me. I got that page where you signed, and it was right next to me. And I hope for one moment you do not contemplate or think, have an idea to unfair workers in this country coming out of the bosom. Then again, some say you ain't come out of the bosom of the Labour Party, but I won't go there with you because you're my friend. I won't go there with you. Member for St. James Central, he will hold you there. And then I move on to social justice. Ensuring that everyone has access to equal opportunities and benefits. That is simple. While not being discriminated against by race, class, or color. Cosmopolitan society. We love people and we treat them with dignity and respect. Those are the three fundamental and guiding principles of labor laws, you know. And I didn't have to go to Wooden to learn that. The late Jeff Combach didn't have to teach me to learn that. That came from negotiating over the years with members of the NUPW and representing workers' rights and the Barbados Workers Union, member for St. George North. Those names I call Gabby Scott. People whom I have a lot of respect for. And political class don't dictate whom I have respect for. It is how you carry yourself that dictates whether I have respect for you. And I say again, I have respect for the member for Christchurch itself. And I hope I don't lose it over the next 2 years or whoever, because at the end of the day, I understand that you have now formed a second DLP. I don't know how true. The second DLP, because I recognize you have chosen a male senator who was thrown out by the current DLP. So I don't know, you bringing him back into your four will create 2 DLPs. And I heard the current president of the Democratic Labour Party refer to you crossing the floor as smoke and mirrors. Straight away, he started to disrespect you. So, Mr. Speaker, that's my friend. I am giving him some advice because I don't want to see anyone unfair you, nor say anything bad about you.
No. Representing.
I don't think we close the door on you. You still have a little time to reconsider. And I will ask the member for St. Michael Northeast and the other members of the organs of this great institution to forgive you. Father, forgive him for he knows not what he's doing. What he's doing. But Mr. Speaker, on a serious note, again, service is not servitude. And while we are here in this Lord Chamber advocating for workers' rights and looking at those guiding principles of labor laws that the member for St. George North, she lives by daily, and her people who are here today, and this Labour Party, the 29 of us, but I should say the 30 of us, because you still belong, you know. We live by those principles. And I would hate to see the day. That's why I stand to support this Labour Clause amendment, this Labour Clause concession bill. Because you can't tell me that the most important sector to economic development, the tourism sector right now, it brings in the most revenue, and the workers are treated poorly. And we must give people time to determine whether they should treat workers right. No. That is not what we stand for as a party. That is not what we stand for as a government. And we must recognize that we're in here on the backs of those same workers that we are representing now. Go out there into your constituencies, and I guarantee you that each and every one of us is going to find at least 20 at a minimum. Some will find more hotel workers. And I represent the center of the island. And I can tell you, many evenings, I get the cries from constituents wanting to exit that sector. And I ask, why then? Only to be explained by the member for St. George North who sits next to me in that lovely parish to tell me, this is the situation. This is why they're asking for the exit, and we will treat with it. And the day has come. And I can forever thank you, member for St. George North, for the support and the leadership you have brought, and the member for St. Peter to this. But Mr. Speaker, in my final words to this chamber, and on this matter, because I will have a lot more to say in this chamber on other matters, we have workers who receive concessions, not only in the hotel sector, but in the construction sector, and we did what we had to do for them. We did what we had to do for them. And I'm asking them not to take advantage of workers in this country, because as we seek to execute our mandate, whether in tourism, whether in housing, whether in business, whether in education, we have stakeholders. We call them workers. Some are also employers, and I am not saying anything against the employers. I am just asking them to journey with us and give the workers what is rightfully theirs and what they earn. Economic efficiency can only be achieved if you, and I heard the Prime Minister mention it, she probably didn't use that term, but economic efficiency in this country can only be achieved if you treat workers right and give them their fair share. And Mr. Speaker, with those words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by welcoming the member for Christchurch South. I don't recall seeing him spend so much time in this chamber in recent years. I believe that in this new incarnation, he will have a little more energy than he has shown this chamber since he first joined it in 2018. Unfortunately, I fear, Mr. Speaker, that he began today sounding, as they say in the country, quite pretty, but in a manner that I consider to be somewhat inauspicious. Perhaps, sir, in the few minutes I have allotted myself, I'll be able to come back to it. Member for Christchurch South, though, must not be the focus of today's proceedings. Member for Christchurch South is not the reason we are here. And I'm reminded of Julius Caesar. I don't remember the specific verse, but I remember it was an occasion when Julius Caesar was walking by, and his response to someone was, let us pass, meaning we can sidestep that and move along. Mr. Speaker, we are here to honor the legacy that was established by the leaders of this great party today. It is not by accident, Mr. Speaker, that the courage to vest in workers of Barbados a right to dignity and to fair treatment has fallen to the lot of the Barbados Labour Party. The member for Christchurch South spoke at length this morning about rights. But on no occasion did the member refer to the rights of the workers. He referred to the rights of the businessmen, but never to the rights of workers. I believe that he had great difficulty answering an uncomfortable question. And that uncomfortable question must have been, how do I start my voyage in this place? How will I try to stamp my mark? Well, he has stamped it, Mr. Speaker. He has stamped it fairly and squarely as the mouthpiece for big business in politics. Now, that is his choice. But I noticed, Mr. Speaker, that throughout his entire presentation, not a single time did he say, I support this bill. There was not a single clause, not a word. I think the Bible says not a jot nor tittle of this bill that is clearly intended, Mr. Speaker, to bring dignity to the hard-working men and women of Barbados, the so-called working class. Not a word of what this chamber is trying to do for them found favor in the eyes or in the mind or in the thinking of the member for Christchurch itself. Again, sir, that is his choice. But we have decided, not just today, but over 80 years ago, where on the question of workers' rights, we stand as a political movement. Mr. Speaker, my father was a member of the Barbados Workers' Union. When he worked at the telephone company, he was there as the chaplain when they went on that big strike many years ago, David Giles. My father was the chaplain. It wasn't an official post, but every day that the workers gathered outside Walmer Lodge to begin their protest, they would ask my father to say the prayer and ask for God's mercies. That is where he comes from, Mr. Speaker. That is the blood that runs in these veins, and that is the blood that I am proud to bear. I cannot understand, Mr. Speaker, why doing this, taking this measure, causes people such great discomfort. Because to a man, all of the people that we've engaged with have said, we believe in treating workers right. We believe in a minimum standard. Everybody, every individual, every entity that is engaged on this matter, except for the member for Christchurch South, everybody has said to a man, we support workers' rights, we support treating workers fairly. But one has to wonder if it isn't that they're speaking with the traditional, you say the fork in tongue. You cannot on the one hand say, I respect the rights of workers and I intend to treat them fairly, but when we try to put a normative basis in law to establish it, all of a sudden you want to run for the hills. It sounds to me, Mr. Speaker, that those people who say that they respect workers' rights and they support workers' rights and they want to ensure that they're treated fairly and with dignity, it sounds as though they're being most insincere. You can't, on the one hand, proclaim it, and then when the government seeks to embrace you in an effort to say, well, since you support it so much, let's make it a law. They want to say, no, we can't put it in law. Why not? Why can it not be enshrined in a law passed in these chambers? Mr. Speaker, the private sector has had several meetings. We've done several consultations. And the member for St. Peter has already pointed out, and the Prime Minister has said in another place, they made some suggestions that we took on board. We couldn't take all on board, but the ones that we didn't take on board, we explained why not, and they were satisfied. So as far as we are concerned, the basis of the bill is sound. But Mr. Speaker, we have a problem in Barbados now. We see it in the cybercrime bill, we see it in the child justice, we see it in all of the legislation, all the deep social legislation that we've passed. Mr. Speaker, I am perhaps at a threshold because I remember when Barbadians read. They read every word in the newspaper. And when they finish it, Mr. Speaker, they look back through to see if they missed something. They didn't have social media, they didn't have the iPad, and they didn't have the news in the pocket. Mr. Speaker, they read every word. And they debated. We have a generation of Barbadians who want to criticize something not because of what they have read in it, but because of a snippet of something they may have seen on social media, or something they heard in the bus stand, or something that somehow or another it has come to them out of the ether. Mr. Speaker, we used to be a proud people who would read and understand. But no, sir, those it is almost an embarrassment. I sat in a meeting yesterday and heard they asked what was wrong with the bill. People said, well, I haven't read it. We've had a debate on cybercrime. We've had marches, Mr. Speaker. And when you ask people what exactly is wrong with the bill, they haven't read it. But I'm asking all of those people who object to this bill, what about it you object to? Do you object to the Chief Labor Officer establishing rates? The Chief Labor Officer was always able to establish rates in public contracts. What about it do you object to now? What about it do you object? Do you object to the parties when you establish your rates being able to appeal to the Employment Rights Tribunal, which is in itself tripartite in nature? One member put in by labor, another by the private sector, and the other one on behalf of the government. Is there something objectionable about it? What don't you like? How many times have we heard people say, I don't like it, yeah, why not? I just don't like it. It defies logic. But we are logical people, and that's why we are here. We have the honor to represent our constituents, but we also have the honor to represent, perhaps unofficially, a whole panoply of human experiences. All of the places that we come from, all the values that we hold there, we represent those too. And we as a party represent the workers of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, that is not inconsistent with our position as a government, because we also represent the business sector. How many times have I said in this chamber that a government, or the purpose of laws, is finding a balance? You have to find, it's a balancing act, Mr. Speaker. And in jurisprudence, we call it finding an outcome while ensuring the minimum of friction and waste. And that's what we do as a government every day. We try to find an outcome. We pass laws for the peace, order, and good government of Barbados while trying to ensure the minimum of friction and waste. And the labor movement, Mr. Speaker, is at a point of contention against capital, and it is the duty of this government to ensure that every step, every effort is made to minimize friction and waste. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has tried to argue all kinds of legal theory, and I enjoy it. I'm not going to be drawn in to a debate on constitutionalism and rights. If the Honourable Member wants to do that, there's a place for that. It is called the law courts. I am satisfied on the law as it stands that we are on good ground. If the member wants to challenge that, there's a place for it. I'm not going to get in here and trade sections of this act and sections of that, acts that he clearly has not even read. Hasn't read them. In fact, if he had read them, he would not have engaged in any of that dialogue that he engaged in today. But what a terrible business. We have come to the place where we open our mouths and talk without having bothered to read the subject matter. The member said this morning, he read the act this morning. It was on the order of paper since last week. But I guess since last week, he was busy trying to figure out who he can appoint and what the swearing was going to be. It was on the order of paper since last week.
That's a lot.
How many sections is it? 8 sections and 3 scheduled.
Why you ain't appoint 2 people?
He read it this morning.
It can't take so long to appoint 2 people.
Well, I agree. It doesn't take long to find 2 people, and it don't take long to read the bill neither. But he read it this morning. I believe he read it poorly. And he snatched some legal theories out of the air and tried to throw them into this chamber. Like, you remember Independence, you used to pelt a bandit in the crowd? You used to light the bandit, pelt in the crowd, and wait for people to scatter. That's how he described the members' antics this morning. He lit a bandit. Only problem is that the bandit fibs. There was nothing to it. And in a moment, I hope he finds more time to read constitutional law than he's found to read this. And yes, the member for St. Peter did come to me. Member for Christian South said, you have to go to the AG this afternoon. And he will tell you. I told the member for St. Peter, carry on, my brother. We got this. But if the member for Christchurch South feels that there's a problem with it, he's a lawyer. He knows where he can take it. And he will spend all of his time trying to work out who is biased and who isn't biased. I've never heard such a more disgraceful red herring in my life. And personally, I feel insulted, but that's not to be his concern. Remember, talked about a minister or ministers who didn't get a contribution saying, I got you now. Where did that come from? How can you be so disingenuous? The member has chaired entities in Barbados. I can't imagine anybody would even imagine that member for Christ South would engage in that kind of conduct. He is attributed, I mean, I don't know, at the end of it all, after talking about bias, he went on to say, no person shall be a judge in his own cause. I don't see the relevance of that either. Don't see the relevance of that either. It came to mind at the time. Mr. Speaker, I wish that the member for Christchurch South had an opportunity to stand in this chamber on this particular bill and say to the workers of Barbados, many of whom come from Christchurch South and work in hotels on the South Coast, work all through the hospitality sector and say to them, I am with you on this. I don't like the Barbados Labour Party anymore. Not that we care. Don't like them more. But as a worker, I want you to know, my brother, that I am with you. I hope he gets a chance to do that over the next few days. What he has said to this chamber is, I don't have nothing against the workers, but I believe that this bill should not pass. I'm sorry to disappoint the member for Christchurch South because this bill is going to pass with resounding votes. And, Mr. Speaker, he could call for a divide. In fact, I hope he calls for a divide. I dare him to call for a divide and say to the workers of Barbados, I do not support this bill, which is intended to guarantee you fair treatment, decent treatment, fair wages and conditions. I defy him to do that. I defy him to call for a divide. Mr. Speaker, there are some moments in history that very few of us get to be a part of. I wish I could have been in Parliament when the legislation was passed to give universal adult suffrage. I wish I could have been in Parliament for the first debate of the Barbados Independence Constitution. And I believe that as we look through all of the great social causes of Barbados, there are moments that would capture our imagination and we would say, I wish I could have been there when it happened. Mr. Speaker, there are 30 of us in here today. On the 13th of February 2024, this is a watershed moment. This is one of those moments in history, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to be able to stand in this chamber and for all time to be counted as one of those who were here, but also one of those who will say, I am obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have had a fulsome debate, and I thank all honourable members who participated in this debate. I always use scripture as a reference point, and without quoting the text, I will have to say that I thank even those who suggest that there are persons who, because they haven't given me a contribution for my campaign, that I may take a position against them. In other words, I thank everybody. I show no partiality. I agree, Mr. Speaker, with the Honourable Member for St. Joseph that we are at a watershed moment. This is a moment where we say to the country that we stand firmly on the side of the working people in this country. And I feel energized in this fight because I often heard my predecessor as Member of Parliament for St. Peter say that those who labor in a good cause do not labor in vain. And that keeps me going, along with a whole lot of other things. Now, many of the questions that have been raised, I think, have been adequately addressed, and so I will not detain the House for long. I will say that the bill, I spoke earlier in my lead-off about an error, actually about two. They're related to drafts. So I don't want us to give the impression that the cabinet approved something that had errors and those kinds of things. I'm not going to spend any time really on that. I also would like to indicate that this bill is really about encouraging good behavior. We want businesses in this country to flourish. Because when they flourish, they will expand, they will employ more people. This is not to put anybody out of business. This is encourage good behavior as we pursue our economic development. The bill, is very clear on the roles of the relevant ministers, and I think a reading beyond a cursory one will show the role of the minister responsible for labor. It will also show the role of the ministers responsible for granting concessions. I will end this brief wrap-up by restating a position taken by the world in 1944 in Philadelphia, in what is called the Declaration of Philadelphia, or the Philadelphia Declaration. It is what has become for me a mantra, even though it represents a principle that I've sought to live my life by for many decades. And it is the simple concept that labor is not a commodity. Labor is not a commodity because labor is the product of living, breathing human beings. This legislation, this proposed legislation, the bill before this honorable chamber, is a bill that sits on that foundation. It recognizes the intrinsic humanity of workers, and it seeks to protect those workers against the whims and the fancies of some few rogue employers who may seek to diminish their humanity. And so, Mr. Speaker, this bill and this Labour Party, this party in government, continues on its road of protecting workers and protecting the ordinary people of Barbados. And with those very few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 stand part.
The question is that clause 7 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 8 stand part.
The question is that clause 8 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The first schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move an amendment to the third schedule to insert at number 4, and this is based on our consultation. Our partners want to have these items listed, and we want to insert at number 4, holidays with pay at, and thereafter renumber the chapter 348, holidays with pay at chapter 348, and thereafter renumber. We're inserting that so that it is in alphabetical order at number 4. And with that amendment, I want to move that that the third schedule as amended be the third schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule as amended be the third schedule of the bill. Honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable Member St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honorable Member St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited the labor clauses concessions Act 2024.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honorable Member St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the instrument Convention 189, Domestic Workers 2011, and Recommendation R201, Domestic Workers 2011.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Speaker, I beg to move that we do now adjourn this sitting to resume on Friday, 16th of February at 3 p.m. Friday, 16th at 3 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Friday, the 16th day of February at 3 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 16th day of February 2024 at 3 p.m.